Okay, there it being 6:30, I'm going to start the zoning board of appeal meeting with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. We're going to adjust the agenda to do 50 Spinnaker Way if they're present. Is 50 Spinnaker Way present? Because we have our attorney Jeff Blake is here, and we want him to be here when for the Spinnaker Way portion. So I'll start off 50 Spinnaker Way LLC administrative appeal from the cease and desist order of the building commissioner dated June 29, 2023, that the use of the property of Spinnaker Way for a short-term rental is not allowed in residential agricultural zoning district as mandated by zoning bylaw Article 5, Section 5.1. The subject property is located at 50 Spinnaker Way, Westport, Mass. and is shown on the assessor's map, 22 lots, 2Y and 20K. And what prompted this was a letter from the zoning enforcement officer, and I'll read it. Prohibited the use of 20 Spinnaker Way, Westport, Mass. and this is dated June 26, 2023. Dear Attorney Pellegrini, please be advised that after reviewing the Town of Westport zoning bylaws and the complaints by neighbors to the property located at 50 Spinnaker Way, the property, I have reached the conclusion that the use of the property for short-term rental is not allowed in a residential agricultural zoning district. I reached this conclusion based on the Town of Westport zoning bylaw Section 5 use regulations, which prohibit any property use that is not specifically authorized in Section 5.1, Table of Use Regulations. Short-term rentals are not specifically authorized as permitted. Section 5 use regulations, except as provided in Section 5.1 hereof, no building or structure shall be constructed, and no building, structure, or land or part thereof shall be used for any purpose or in any manner other than for one or more of the uses hereinafter set forth as permitted in the district in which such building, structure, or land is located, or set forth as permissible by special permit in said district and so authorized. Note number 4 of the Table of Use Regulations 5.1 prohibits use not specifically listed in the Table of Use Regulations. And it says, any use not specifically generally listed herein or otherwise permitted in a district shall be deemed to be prohibited. Short-term rentals are not specifically or generally listed in the Table of Uses. The most similarly used in the residential district is for room rental boarding for not more than 4 persons in a dwelling. I interpret this section to apply to more permanent rentals, as boarding connotes a term longer than a few days. Therefore, the use of the property for short-term rental is inconsistent with and not allowed in the current zoning district, and you are hereby ordered to cease and desist any further use of the property as a short-term rental in violation of the Town of Westport zoning bylaws. Ralph Souza, zoning enforcement officer. So that's what prompts this petition. So the way this meeting is going to be run, I'll have the petitioner or the petition representative come forward, provide whatever information is pertinent. The board will then ask questions of the petitioner. Once the board has completed the discussions with the petitioner, I'll then open it up to the public, and then afterwards we'll close the hearing and continue. So, name it, and if you are going to speak, name and address. So.
Okay.
Who's voting?
Oh, good. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, voting on this will be Jerry Catino, Barbara Pontalillo, myself, Roger Menard, Constance Gee, and Ray Elias.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Robert Pellegrini. You probably remember me. My business address is 63 Main Street, Bridgewater, Massachusetts. I want to start by just asking Town Council, is my request for a continuance, are we beyond that
I don't think so, no, you can certainly,
Okay.
in fact, I think the board was expecting you to
Okay.
at least make that request, and
Okay.
then they'll make a determination, and depending
Okay.
upon where we go from there, we could walk out or
Okay.
continue.
Based on the fact that my clients are very actively trying to sell the house at this point, I thought it best for everybody, including the town, that we continue it for until your next meeting, which I assume is about 30 days. I think within that time frame, we'd probably be, the issue's probably gonna be moot. I think obviously to me, I've been doing this for 25 years almost. I understand when the writing's on the wall, and I just thought that, you know, cost-wise and for everything else that you guys put in, perhaps you love these types of nights. I particularly wouldn't think you would, so I was just trying to spare everybody from that.
So you're saying that, that if we granted a continuance, that there's a likelihood that you would withdraw at the next meeting
Simply because,
because you don't own the property anymore?
yeah, I brought their real estate agent with me in case you didn't, for some reason, believe that it's being actively marketed. But as I'm sure you can imagine, they don't want any part of doing this anymore, and, you know, understandably so. So that was, I'm a practical thinker, and to me, that made a lot of sense for
Okay,
everybody.
so are you, do we have the form that we, okay, good. We have a form that tells out if we were to do this.
Okay.
So you're officially asking for a continuance?
Yes,
Okay, is the property now still being rented?
it is, yes.
Just him,
Yes, it is.
yes. And for how long is it going to be rented?
Until well, obviously, not after they don't own it anymore.
What
However,
I'm saying is, how long is it scheduled, how long do they have renters already booked?
I haven't personally looked, or do I have access to, but of course I did ask them to say, you know, what's out there now, and they told me that obviously with summer being over at the end of August, the frequency goes way down. I think they said the weekends in September are booked, but that is all that there is. I mean, I'm just going off of what they said.
Now, you realize, and Attorney Blake back me up on this, or tell me if I'm wrong, that when Ralph sent you a cease and desist order, at that point in time, you were supposed to
Okay.
cease and desist renting.
We've gone back and forth on that all day today. I was unaware, I think even during the last hearing on the record, somebody
But this is-
acknowledged this. I
This is a
know.
whole different case.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but it's still a cease and desist, it's the same issue. My understanding was that there was an appeal period. And that we're waiting for a hearing, and if we had to appeal to court, the same thing would happen. I'm waiting to see it in a court case or something like that. I'm not pointing the finger. I mean, nobody's job here is to teach me the law, but I don't know of any reason why they shouldn't continue.
Attorney Blake, can you enlighten us onto the legal aspects of this?
Sure. I will tell you, and as I've said before, there's not a lot of case law on this. We've always taken a position that a cease and desist order by a building commissioner is valid until it's not, right? And until it's not means it's overturned by the zoning board of appeals, and at that, it's still valid. I had a recent case in my office, the Brayton Point case, where that was not the issue, but the court upheld fines that were issued from the date of the cease and desist through the ZBA appeal, through the appeal to the Superior Court, which, in my opinion, infers and implies that the cease and desist was valid all the way through that period. to give my brother at least, I don't want to mislead you. It's not black and white. There's nothing that says, I couldn't find a court case that says it's valid in what I've told you. I've always taken that position, and I think this Brayton Point case, which is a fairly recent case, backs me up on that.
So, can I ask a question now? So if we uphold the cease and desist, what happens then?
It's not upholding it. We either, right now, we're just, whether we're granting or not a continuance.
And so if we do not grant them a continuance, then they continue to be in violation of the cease and desist.
No, if we don't grant a continuance, then you continue with the hearing at the moment.
Right.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have a question. Since the cease and desist, is there a fine in place now? I'm asking
No.
Rod. No, okay.
I would like to say that I think the presentation is a little fuzzy. Maybe it'll be rented, maybe it won't be rented. I'm not sure how much it's been rented. I'm sure you could get from your client records of when it's been rented or not rented.
I can absolutely
and
do that.
booking
Yes.
and so forth. And I would have expected you would be here presenting that tonight.
For what purpose?
For the purpose of convincing us that we should continue it for you.
I'm not sure how that
Well, I think it's very
Well,
important.
all right,
is applicable.
there's three balls we have to try and balance.
Right.
There is there is Ralph's letter saying cease and desist, stop immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There is your appeal saying we don't want to,
We don't
we don't believe that's correct.
it's valid.
Because that's
right.
all you can do on this, is you're saying that
Yeah.
Ralph incorrectly administered the zoning bylaws. There's also the neighbors, there's actually four balls, there's a lot of balls. There's also the neighbors that we have to be concerned about.
Yeah.
And to some extent, we have to be concerned about the people who honestly rented thinking that they're going to have a vacation next week.
Right.
So some way we have to find, in my opinion, some way of judiciously, as equally as possible, making a decision as far as the continuance is concerned, how it affects all those parties, not just the zoning part of it, but the neighborhood part of it. And I believe we have to also consider the impact of the people renting, because it wasn't their fault that we're going through this process.
Why should that enter into it?
Well, I mean, personally, and again, this is just me, I think we have to try and at least how would you like it if you rented a home and they say tomorrow you can't come next week and your vacation is shot for 2 weeks?
I probably wouldn't like it personally,
Right,
but
so-
I don't know if it.
I think it's a consideration. If, and again, this is just talking, if we were to grant the continuance with the provision that there would be no further continuances and there would be no renting after the 20th of September, would that be something that your client would be amenable to?
I see what you're saying. So after the 20th of September?
Our next meeting, I think, is the 20th of September. If, and again, I'm just hypothetical here, trying to say, okay, at least we now have a light at the end of the tunnel. At 20 September, we're going to make a decision, you're either in or out, and that's it. That at least serves us the point of saying, okay, we are serving the law, we're considering the neighborhood that, okay, it's another month they have to put up renters, but at least there's there's an end in sight. I think, and again, I think that's a possibility. But it's only a possibility if your client would accept that. That, again, then the position would be no more, that we only grant one continuance, you come in next month, and either you withdraw, or we hear the case, and at that point, there would be no no bookings after the 20th of September.
What if we don't uphold the cease and desist order, then they can continue to book? So
No,
you're
but-
asking them, you're basically you're asking them to do something that they might not have to do as a matter of law, right?
I think I can make it
Right.
easier for you.
Because we don't know how we're gonna vote.
No, I'm
Right?
just saying, this is just would you be amenable to that? Whether we vote on it or not is a whole
No, I'm
different.
saying voting on the cease and desist. If
We're only voting on a continuance at the moment.
I know, but you're saying if we allow the continuance, and after we have our meeting on September 20th, they can't rent September 21st regardless of how we vote on the 20th.
Well, no, obviously, if we
Okay, it's not-
if we uphold his position that Ralph was wrong,
Yes.
then they're in accordance with the bylaws and they're allowed to rent. But if we agree with Ralph that in fact his interpretation of the zoning bylaw is correct, then at that point, they cannot rent
Right.
from that point on. Again, I'm just throwing this out as a hypothetical.
I'll defer to our town council on the legality of that, because then we're technically, then if they have a right to appeal our decision by saying that we're only giving you a continuance if you do this, and if the law is vague, then we're denying them a right to be able to rent it while they are in
Okay.
appeal.
I think it's perfectly
Okay.
fine to make a condition of the continuance, what the chair has suggested.
My concern about that is, in my opinion, this applicant has basically thumbed his nose at the town and the neighbors, and I think that's wrong. But do I go on feelings, or do we try to be more practical? My concern of that potential solution is that come the 21st of September, if it goes that they did violate the building code, the building laws, and as far as I can see, a Supreme Court of Massachusetts decision about this as a business in a residential area, in the West Linfield case, my concern is that on the 21st, they're gonna keep on renting, and then we've gotta do something about, implementing the $300 a day.
Jerry's
and
concern
so-
is that, yes, the petitioners have thumbed up and not complied with what we've asked them to do, but so has the residents. They have a legal recourse based upon that Linfield case saying that it's a business and residential district, and they have a deed restriction. They could have actually filed a lawsuit and actually stopped this instead of bringing the town.
Right,
into
that's the
this.
other half of
So
this
I
thing.
think they're
is that
both
the neighbors that we're concerned about
also having a recourse here.
had and have an ability, obviously at their expense, to get legal thing, and we're trying to solve it for them.
I want to just add one thing, and I want everybody to understand this, and I think Attorney Blake will back me up on this. It is always better, in the best interest of the town and the petitioner, if the petitioner withdraws a petition. It is always better. It is cheaper, you don't have to worry about an appeal, it is done, it's over with. So allowing a continuance to next month with the anticipation of withdrawal allows us to get out of this without any other legal hassles. And Attorney, you agree with that? That withdrawal is always preferable?
It's always better not to move forward in court.
Yes.
Because, but I do want to just clarify, I told you that the law is not, there's no case law on the period between a zoning enforcement officer's order and an appeal to the zoning board of appeals. The law, as to a stay, the law is clear with respect to a zoning board of appeals order determination and an appeal to the Superior Court. That order is not stayed, and in order to get it stayed, they'd have to go into court and ask the court to stay it.
Okay.
So just so that you know, that your concern is from if you had to go forward on the 20th and you found in favor of the building commissioner, in order for them to continue work, to continue on, they would have to go and ask for a stay with the
But
Superior
at that
Court.
point, then, they could be charged on a daily basis from that point forward.
They could, yeah.
We could
No,
fine
no,
him from the
disposition.
21st of September, even if they appeal it. Well,
You could.
correct,
But
okay.
if they didn't go to court and get a stay, and they kept on renting, then we're back to where we are.
No,
We go to
whenever,
court.
we go to court, but then we would recoup money all the way back to the 21st of September.
We're not where we are because
Right.
we go to court and get a preliminary injunction. If they
How
don't
long?
appeal, they're stuck with it.
How long, is that after the 20 days? So let's see, September
Yes,
20
yeah,
days.
likely it would have to be a final judgment, yeah, I mean, a final order.
So they got themselves another 20 days.
No, because they would be fined from the 21st on.
You're talking about the $300 a day?
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's if we implement it.
Right.
How many times have we implemented $300 a day
Yeah.
fines? A handful?
You know, and I think I misspoke, I think that you could go and enforce it even before the 20 days expires.
Okay, you were gonna
Oh,
add something?
yeah, you had asked me a question, I was just gonna answer it. You asked if I could get them to agree to just automatically not rent it anymore. Again, I think it would be sold before that, but I can't get them to agree to do that.
So you can't get them to
There is
agree-
no guarantee there.
You can't get them to guarantee that they would not rent after the 21st of September?
No.
Okay, then, all right.
No.
Okay.
Anyway, so
I
we
mean, I think there's a lot more
you want to read the
behind it.
motion, read the request, just to make sure we have this on record?
I, Robert Pellegrini Jr. Esquire, request that the hearing on my petition be continued until next available hearing or third weekdays.
I assumed it was roughly 30 days, approximately.
September 20th.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
I understand that the deadline for making a decision will be extended accordingly. Signed, Robert Pellegrini Jr.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a request. Discussion before we make a motion?
Yes. Again, he keeps saying, I think the house might be sold and all this stuff. I mean, he could put a unbelievable price tag on the house. You could say, well, I'm not gonna
Okay.
sell the house for a certain thing. It's so indefinite. Everything that I'm hearing here is so indefinite. I wouldn't trust a bit of it.
Okay, discussion?
I have a comment about your four balls in the air. I think us considering tenants, people who have rented it, I don't think we should take that under consideration. I think that's bad business, but that's not our problem. I feel for those people if they should lose their vacation, but I don't think that's any of our business.
Okay, anybody else?
I agree with Barbara, and I also think that this whole thing is very disingenuous and fuzzy and obviously a delay tactic.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, I'm going to do something now that's, it's going to sound counterproductive, but, and I hope Attorney backs me up on this. It is always advisable to start off with a motion to grant the motion and second it. And again, that's only a motion, not a vote. So having said that, then, I am going to make a motion to grant the continuance of this petition until September 20th. Do I have a second? Again, it's just a motion.
I'll make a motion, I'll second that
Okay.
motion for purposes of moving forward.
Right. And the reason why this is done, because our rules on our zoning bylaws say that we need 3 voting members to approve a motion. It doesn't say what's required to reject a motion. So therefore, making a motion to grant is always preferable. So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we take vote?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're clear that we're voting on a continuance.
We're voting on a
and not
continuance.
the matter that was
Right.
before us.
So we're only voting on a continuance to September 20th. All in favor?
By the
say-
way, let me throw a little monkey wrench here, as I informed the chair earlier tonight. I cannot be here on September 20th.
Mhm.
I have to be away. So that further complicates it, because we either have to have an alternate
Do we-
sit-in, or,
I'm in.
Cynthia was
Are
here
we
the
all-
last meeting too.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, so
Okay.
that's what I'm saying, we have to make sure
Yes,
there's enough people for
Yes.
the 20th.
okay.
We don't open this particular hearing to the people out here, or we've
Um,
done that,
it's-
but if there's new
I can.
information.
I can open it up to the public as far as just the continuance.
Just to continue.
Just the continuance, not the vote on whether this is to agree with the petition. This is just discussion on continuance. Anybody want to say anything? Go ahead, microphone. Can we keep it short, because it's going to be a long night?
Okay. My name's Anna Sylvia, and I own 52A Spinnaker Way with my husband James and my daughter. I know you said this is a continuous, and I heard Brenda Hernandez and Roger Andrews' attorney, Mr. Pellegrini, say that he's not sure what the house is being rented, when the house is being rented. Well, the house is fully booked the whole month of August, well into September, as well as the house is booked already for July of 2024 and August of 2024. Those individuals have no intentions whatsoever of selling this house. They just simply want to continue this, so they simply continue to cash up on it. They don't even show up at the house, they just rent this house out and cash a check. The trash overflows, we have to deal with the trash all over the neighborhood. I have to deal with the landscape.
I just want to focus on continuing it to next month. We can talk about the appeal if we have to later. So what is your rationale, whether or not you're for or against a
I'm against
continuance?
it. I'm against it.
Okay.
These people are just playing a game. They came into this neighborhood, a residential area, to run a hotel.
Yes.
The guests only stay for 1 night, 2 nights, maximum 3 nights. What scares me the most is another encounter I had a couple weeks ago, getting home from work with one of those guests standing in my driveway as I'm coming down the stairs of my house in my undergarment, putting my t-shirt on, and he's smack staring inside of my house. Is that why we're going to continue this? So they can come down to a private property that has a sign saying, no trespassing, residents only, but now they get the hotel guests march down the road and staring inside of my home when I'm home alone with a 23-month-old infant.
Okay, thank you. Anybody
I
else?
don't think it should be continued. This is out of control.
Hi, Anthony Grassi, 52 Spinnaker Way. I don't think it should be continued either, because obviously he's here right now. He's the attorney representing them, and he can basically either say his reasons why he thinks this is not a legitimate complaint, or it is a legitimate complaint. It should not go on any further than this. As far as them saying, Mr. Pellegrini saying that it's going to be sold in another 30 days, I'm a real estate broker. I've got their MLS pulled up right here. They went from 974,000 when it was a joke in the beginning of the summer to list it just to shut us up. So they finally came down in June to 879. They bought it for 805. And they were the highest bidder because no one else was going to pay 805 for it back when they bought it last year because it was overpriced, but they were looking at it to make money. So until I start seeing this thing dropping drastically by the week, I don't believe they're trying to sell it. I really don't.
Just so you know, Chairman, there's another house 2 doors down that's on the market for $749.
The next door went for sale for $799 because that neighbor is fed up with the whole thing.
Okay.
$799, so that house is gonna sell long before their house, and that house has been on the market 12 days and it's still active. So even a $799 offer didn't get put under agreement in the first weekend like has been in the past with real estate properties. They usually get on the market, they show them that weekend, by the following week they're under agreement because people are lining up to buy them. So I really don't think 879 is gonna sell at any time. Not even anytime soon, anytime.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
49 Spinnaker Way, Alyssa Menard. I know the reasons. I work with, lawyers. I do this day to day, so I get where you're coming from. However, what you don't understand is what we've been going through. This has been going on since February. And it's every single weekend, every single day. We all have young children. We are trying to continue to raise our families, and the reason why we bought this neighborhood was for neighbors. We all are friendly, we all know each other. If they're trying to sell it, they're gonna have them by the end of September. Why isn't that price dropping? Why aren't there people looking at it? There's an open house once a month, maybe. So this is just a delay tactic. I see this all the time, and it's common. So this is just allowing them to finish their renters. It's rented out. You can look on Vrbo. You guys can go home tonight, look on Vrbo, look on Airbnb. You can see how often it's been rented. You can see when it's going to be rented. It's rented this weekend, next week, the week after. If they were truly trying to sell, why would you want to continue to have people in there? How are you gonna show it if there's people constantly in it? So why are we going to continue to allow them to continue to cash in on it in our neighborhood, our homes? This is where we live. I live directly across the street. I have a 1-year-old, I have a 5-year-old, and I have a 10-year-old. My daughter was out doing gymnastics in the front yard in her bathing suit. I have to tell her to go in the backyard because I don't know who's over there. You must have young children or grandchildren. Like, do you know where I'm coming from? If you're afraid to have your daughter out in the front yard in her bathing suit because you don't know who's across the street. Like, there's predators out there. Predators have money.
Okay, thank you.
Predators buy the house.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Rebello. I live at 4 Briar Drive. My husband and I have lived in Westport at that address since 1971. Right now, we're having all these people come into our neighborhood. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know where they're from. Some are from New York, some are from Connecticut, some are from Rhode Island, New Hampshire. We don't know the backgrounds of these people, and we think it's a safety issue, so we are against it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I would like to ask Ms. Sylvia, you indicated that you have a record that it's been rented for next year as well.
Yes.
Could you just tell us where that comes from and
On
how
Airbnb.
valid is that information?
That information was yesterday, and it's on Vrbo. On
And
Vrbo.
Airbnb also,
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes, and it's also on
So you
Airbnb.
can see there's not much intent to...
No, there is no intent to sell this property. Like my neighbor said, otherwise the prices would be dropping, and they would be tending more to their house, and no, it's not there. And if I think if they had a potential buyer, why not bring a purchase and agreement sale with them to prove that there's a potential buyer, which I did not see Attorney Pellegrini with any of it.
Okay, thank
I
you.
could tell someone's trying to buy my house and really not. So how do I know that's true? Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor of agreeing to the continuance, raise your hand. All opposed? It's unanimous. We are not going to continue. We are going to continue with the petition today. So, Attorney, you're up.
Okay. So we're appealing the building inspector's third cease and desist. I sort of gave you a narrative of what I think is important is the history of this project. Before they purchased the house, they asked me to contact the building department to see if this use is allowed in town. I was told on that date that it is. As a result of that, they
Who told you
purchased
that?
the home. Mr. Souza.
Okay.
Okay. January 18th. Okay, I'm going to add some flavor to this. They told me they were buying it as an Airbnb. That's what I asked him. He, quite frankly, very bluntly said, yes, it's an allowed use, but it's limited by the capacity of the septic. So, if it's a 4-bedroom, then it's 4 bedrooms. That's it. I conveyed that to them.
Could I ask you,
yes.
before you go further?
You can ask me whatever you want.
what exactly was the wording of your question to Mr. Souza, in which he told you, yes, it's allowed?
Is Airbnb, short-term rentals, an allowed use in
What
the
does
town?
Airbnb mean?
Short-term rental.
No, what does Airbnb stand
It's just Airbnb.
It's a company
Bed and
that
breakfast.
does
for? Yes,
short-term
and-
rentals.
And doesn't it say breakfast?
No,
It doesn't-
That's
in the
false.
title?
Well, that's
that's
B and
false.
B.
Because-
yes, no.
because-
That's just a name.
Yeah,
It's not a bed and breakfast because it's listed on Airbnb.
so I would.
Okay,
Mr.
that's
Souza.
not a gray area. Airbnb does not mean you're a B&B.
No, I
Okay.
understand that.
Okay.
I want to ask Mr. Souza, is that what you understood, was that he
I don't
was
even
not
remember
going
the
to do it?
conversation.
What's that, please?
I don't even remember the conversation.
Okay.
It's really, I'm just giving you this because I keep hearing that they're nefarious and they're doing things wrong. I particularly asked them not to speak at this hearing because I thought we're in agreement that we wanted to keep the last one very cut and dry. So I was doing it with you guys in mind and not participating in the circus that seems to be happening. So I was doing that with you in mind, not to hide things, all right? So moving forward, on June 18th, they received a cease and desist. But this wasn't for Airbnb, okay? This was because they made a mistake, okay? They thought they could do this other thing. I'm sure you've all seen it and heard tons of people telling you about it. They called me and said, I think we have a problem. I said, you have a problem. This is a small town. We all know that. This is never gonna go away now. You screwed up. So they said, well, what do we have to do? I said, take that down and forget you ever did it. But just keep in mind, nobody else is gonna forget it. And I was right, and I keep reminding them of that. But we're not hiding anything. They made a mistake. They took it down, they're over it, and they're just Airbnb-ing it. There was some stuff after, with the number of bedrooms. They're not experts at this. They've been learning, and I think you've seen enough to know that every time something was reasonably asked of them, and, they've done that. So on the 18th, they received that. I got it. I had a call, and we, cleared that up. February 13th, three people came into the home to check the number of bedrooms. Fine, that went great. March 6th, 2023. So, telling you this just because I think the history paints a pretty good picture. There was an order from the health director to reduce the number of bedrooms that was pursuant to the walkthrough, and a hearing was put on the record at that time. After that, I told them how it works with, a bedroom means there's a bed in there. So they said, we didn't know, sorry. They pulled it out. They went through the house again. Everything was fine, so they pulled that off the agenda. Then again in March, on the 28th, they received a letter from Mr. Armando citing Title V violations due to numerous complaints about the number of cars parked there and the number of people at the house. I'm quoting. I wrote a reply at this point. I had their emails and said, I'm sorry, but Title V doesn't have anything to do with cars parked. That has to do with the number of bedrooms. He said, yep, you're right, sorry, pulled it off the agenda. Then, a day later, they received the second cease and desist, saying that the home was being used as a bed and breakfast, and you know how that went. On April 3rd, just a few days after that, the Board of Health had a public informational meeting just to calm everybody down. I voluntarily went. I brought my clients as well, just to meet with people, talk to people, try to calm everybody's nerves. Obviously, it didn't work, but I thought it was a good faith effort to try to do it. some of the concerns that came up there were related to them filing an application potentially to expand the number of bedrooms. We discussed it before that even happened. They didn't go any further with that. There's been no activity on that. There's no plans to do it. By the way, the only reason is it was sold to them and listed as a whatever, I don't know what it is presently. Is it 4 now? It was sold as a 5. So, you know, they were just trying to make it match what it was listed as. And as soon as this started to happen, they just withdrew. And nothing's gonna ever be heard about that again. June 21st was the ZBA meeting. Okay, I have to go backwards. Let's see. All right, during the April 3rd Board of Health meeting, you know, just to sort of clarify or reiterate what we had heard before, the chairperson, Chair Ryden, informed the neighbors during the public meeting, it's easily available online, that short-term rentals aren't regulated by the town. One of the board members, Weinberg, added the same info as well. He also added there's a lot of people in town who rent their homes, which there is. And he added that it's not considered a commercial activity at the time. Perhaps it wasn't. I know there's a case that just came out that might speak otherwise, but he obviously knows what he's talking about, and once again was trying to participate in calming the nerves, but everybody seems to be pointing the finger saying we're doing nefarious things and I'm trying to skirt the system. And no, we keep hearing that it's an allowed use, and I don't think that it's fair and just to point the finger at one person and try to say that, oh, no, it's not allowed for you, but everybody else, it's fine. I mean, yeah, they screwed up, yeah, they upset the neighbors, but in my opinion, there's a pathway forward for this. It's a very clear and simple one. You're already in the process of changing the bylaws. I think that's a great way to do it. In the meantime, they're actually actively trying to sell the house. I think they've had 10 open houses, and the price might be based on lots of things. I'm not going to start speculating, but I know they put a lot of money into the house when they first bought it, and perhaps it's nicer than the one down the street. I don't really know, but once again, I don't think that a real estate agent telling somebody what they should list the house at means they're bad people and they're trying to trick the town. They don't want it. They're not happy about the situation. And I'm telling you that because I've had to deal with it. June 29th, 2023.
Why are they renting a year out?
I don't know that they are. I have to be
I don't
honest.
think they are. It's blocked out for all of like next 2024, which means they're not taking rentals at this time. Not that it completely.
That is
blocked out.
more likely the case, to be
That's how
honest. Yeah.
Airbnb works. You don't want to rent, you block it out. And it's just blocked out. I just looked, it's blocked out from next September, October, November, December, all of 2024.
I think when you list it, you can say, you know, I'll only, when you start out and you're telling Airbnb what to put in their formula, I think you say, all right, these are the parameters that I want to set. If you're telling me that it's blocked out in September, they probably said, don't go more than a year out
Yeah.
at the very beginning.
It's blocked out actually a year from today. So it's
Okay,
blocked
that's
out-
exactly what it is
Right,
then.
so it's
Yeah.
blocked out from August 23rd, which is tomorrow, right, to all through all of the rest of 2024. So that means they're not renting it, that means it's just not available and open for rental yet.
You're talking October 31st, 2023?
August
I mean, August 21st.
24.
Right.
A year from now, sort of it's sort of the standard. You don't you don't rent out more than a year in advance. So therefore, you can't rent it a year in advance from now because it's blocked out completely from tomorrow, a year from tomorrow, August 23rd, 2024.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. So my point in just requesting a continuance wasn't to try to buy time. I really don't think this is gonna be a big season for them. It's more that, these things, when they tend to keep coming back to the zoning board, they tend to then move on to court, and I don't think that's a pleasant experience for anybody. And I'm thinking it's gonna sell. I know there's been a lot of activity. I've been talking to their real estate agent recently, and I'm just trying to avoid that. I'm not trying to sneak in an extra 25 days or anything like that. I sort of added a lot of things that probably aren't worth getting into. I think the point of the matter is, I think at this point we have sufficient, I've said sufficient number of things to say I think it's an arbitrary, vague enforcement at least, because I know everybody else is allowed to do it except for them. I get the point. I know how it works. And my point in suggesting the extra time was simply to take the heat off of you and allow time for this bylaw to get written and the house to get sold. And at this point, it's a done deal. Like, I know everybody thinks they're out to get everybody. They just want to move on, not lose their shirt in the process if they can, and get over this. I think the next steps are extremely unpleasant for everybody. I'm sure your town council can agree. It's not why I practice law. It's one of the things that we tend to lose some hair over. And that's really the only reason I was suggesting we push it off. My sense is that it's going to be a moot issue very soon. So with that in mind, with this, my main concern being clearly they're being targeted, and the arbitrary nature of...
Targeted? Can you go further with that, please?
I just think that the number of people that have been in the house, the number of hearings that we've all been to, it seems to be a little bit much. The third time's a charm on the cease and desist. I'm not trying to be overly argumentative. I'm just laying out what I think is the history of the project. I know I really upset you right there. I can take that word back, but I'm just saying with the history, it seems to me that it's pretty heavy on this. And I understand that it's because they made that error in the beginning, and I understand how information travels. I'm from the town next door. I get it, and I've been doing this for long enough. I just don't know, like, if I try to help out and ask them not to speak, and the answer or the conclusion made is they're trying to hide and be nefarious, like, I don't think there's a winning way here. And quite frankly, I'm just trying to explain to you my take on it, and why I think there's an issue here. Is I think that the town is trying to make a good bylaw, and that's wonderful, but until now, we've heard from multiple sources that it at least was considered allowed. It's being used that way by a lot of people. And I just ask that we, get a clear and concise bylaw.
Let me just interject a little bit, because I read all your considerations, and they always revolve around the same theme, which is essentially why me and not why everybody else. Let me just finish my thought here.
Of course.
This is the first of this case that we've heard. We have never had another case like this in the history of, and Jerry's been here since the beginning of time, so he can atone to us. So it's not like you're being picked on, it just, you happen to be the first case. I assume that there's going to be more, because we all know that there are rentals in Westport, but the zoning enforcement officer's job is not to go search them out. He is also the building inspector. So he isn't banging on people's doors to find out who's violating something. The only thing he can work on is when somebody complains about it. When they complain about it, then he has to take action. And in that case, that's how it got to us. So it's not like we're picking on you, it just happens to be, you just happen to be the first one that has had enough of a back to make a formal complaint to the zoning enforcement officer. He was then mandated to then investigate it, and that's why we're here. So, like I said,
Okay.
this is not a, why you and not why everybody else.
Yeah. And it
I
sounds,
anticipate that this isn't going to be the only one of these cases.
and in this case, it sounds like these people made bad financial decisions, bad business decisions, and the reason we're here is because they're not running a positive business, thus the whole neighborhood is showing up against it. If they ran a more positive business, perhaps this wouldn't have come to this.
Can I object?
Yeah.
If you read the reviews on Airbnb, they're running a positive business based upon the people who are renting.
In the business.
Well, from their perspective.
From the renter's perspective. And also, I just think everybody needs to hear this, because I'm not voting on this, and I think you should know that the homeowners are not being forthcoming, right? If you read the reviews, and if you take them for their truth, the neighbors immediately next to across from the house have signs protesting the house as an Airbnb for the houses for sale. The rules, the house rules are very strict, and neighbors walking by were slowly taking pictures, which just made us uncomfortable. So the neighbors themselves are acting as poorly as some of the poor renters have been acting. And I understand there's been some poor renters, but there's also been people who were just there with their family and had vacation, and they're then subjected to being picketed and being pictures taken
So
care
it's
of.
gone both ways.
I think it's gone both ways, and I think that's important for the board to understand.
You don't get to talk until we're done.
I don't not feel for the homeowners in the neighborhood, but I don't think the only solution that's gonna make them happy is that the house is sold and somebody nice moves in. Because if somebody not nice moves in, it's just gonna have another issue in and of itself, and regardless if they're renting it or not. I think that unfortunately, the homeowners just got the wrong neighborhood, and they got the wrong neighbors. And they made some poor choices in who they rented to, but not all of them.
Right. I didn't say all of them.
And I think that there's been actions to make somebody's vacation not so pleasant based on the homeowners. So I just don't think they're being very forthcoming. They're telling the story from one side.
Anyone else want to add? Or if there's any questions from the board?
I do just want to just add a couple more things. First of all, if you wanted to hear from their real estate agent, he's here and he's willing to talk to you. I do know that it would certainly help them sell the house if the neighbors weren't yelling at some of the people coming to see the property. And I know that a couple of people that were interested did back away because of that, plus the signs, and I'm not by any way trying to restrict someone's freedom of speech. I'm just saying it's gotten in the way. I've received 3 calls from the agent saying that somebody backed out because of that. So yeah, of course there's 2 sides. I've chosen to not go there. But I'm assuming that the board knows that there's always 2 sides to something. I'm willing to go there. I just feel like your night is long enough, and this is an appointed position, and quite frankly, I get it.
I'm going to make just a jump of an assumption. I'm going to make a jump of an assumption here.
Yeah.
And again, this is my assumption, just being a neighbor, is they're certainly upset about the renters. If there were no renters and it was only people coming in to buy the house, I would expect that the neighbors would react differently.
Yeah.
But they don't know what it is now because it's being rented. So how can they tell the difference between a renter coming in and somebody coming in to look to buy the house?
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the fact of the matter is it's impeding the process. So I think that really, once again, if you want to hear that side of it, you can, but I'm again trying to keep it direct and to the point. You did hear the last time that there was some reporting to the police, so I got the police report, and there was nothing but 4 phone calls, and out of that, 2 of them were because Ralph Caesar from the building department advised them to call the police. And at the other one, somebody was just saying that he just wants to let the police know that somebody is renting the home via Airbnb. And the 4th one was for the same exact reason, just to advise the police that it was being rented as an Airbnb. I don't think it's quite as bad as you've heard. And quite frankly, don't think you care. But nor should you. I mean, your job here is very clear. You're here to determine whether or not the building inspector is right and your bylaw is good. So I'll leave you guys alone. I know you have a long night. If you have any questions or you need me to chime in, just ask me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have another comment, and that is rereading the original letter from Ralph. I wish we had read it a little more carefully at the last hearing. I don't think Ralph was wrong, even in the first letter, because he says you're using commercial use and puts the things. He never said, he just said it's not, commercial use is not allowed. And the only reference he made to bed and breakfast, and by the way, Airbnb, I just looked it up, it does say bed and breakfast. So if you asked him what you said you asked him about Airbnb, that would be an implied bed and breakfast, and it is allowed. And he says it in his first thing. He doesn't say, I'm denying it because you're doing a bed and breakfast. He just simply says, as per the table of use, bed and breakfasts are allowed by a special permit from the Board of Appeals. And he doesn't even tell you go to the Board of Appeals. He just says that. And that's a true statement. Our bylaws, and what if he answered you based on your question, is Airbnb allowed? It is. It's allowed in our bylaw very specifically.
It just wasn't that though. It was a chat about short-term rentals. But
So I'm just concerned about that.
okay, I just want you to know that he sent that in response to the advertisement that it was going to be a wedding venue or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's why he sent that.
He makes note of that, right.
Yeah.
He does make, but a wedding venue could also be a bed and breakfast, okay?
Okay.
So the other thing is the contention about, are we picking on this one individual? We're not. I'm not going to repeat it all. Roger has indicated that this is the first one that's come to us. We're certainly actively trying to do this. We're trying to fix things for the future so they're much more clear. But this is the first one. Now, my last question to you is, are you familiar with the West Linfield case?
No.
With the building? Well, there's the Supreme Court case in Massachusetts. I believe it was 21. Is that right? 2021. I think it was June of 2021.
June 7th.
I know. I 22nd. Okay. I have read it, and it's pretty important because it's almost exactly what we're dealing with. It's someone wanting to use the house for a venue, and it got appealed to the Supreme Court in Massachusetts, and they pretty clearly stated this is a business use and is only allowed in a business zone area. So if you're not familiar, you might want to take a look. You may or may not agree with it, but that's certainly the way it seemed to come out. It was kind of talked about a lot in planning board and zoning board when it came out as being a very important case. So, because it was very clear that it was a business use in a non-business area. So I just want to point that out.
So if there's no other comments, I'll open it up to the public. Wait a minute. You first.
Do you need me to stay here?
Yeah, you can stay.
Well, may
Oh,
I?
stay here?
May I
You
sit?
should.
You may sit, yes.
Oh, I guess whatever you want.
I should stay?
Stay
If you
in that
want-
seat.
Yes? Okay.
Or he's asking that seat, not that he's
Okay.
leaving.
I think it's good that he's near a microphone in case he has to
Yeah.
answer a question from
Okay.
everybody else.
Name and address.
My opinion.
Anthony Grassi, 52 Spinnaker Way. I'd like to comment on something you said about the Airbnb. In Airbnb, the thing. So how it works, because I've done Airbnbs myself, not run them, but been to them. So after you leave an Airbnb, you get to leave a comment. You leave the comment before the owner of the property leaves a comment. If you put a negative comment, they attack you and put a negative comment saying you were the problem. Then other people will read comments made on you before, and they will choose not to rent to you. So no matter what's happening, they're going to leave a good comment.
But I don't think a good comment, they did not.
That's actually not
that-
true.
That's.
I
they
just
didn't-
had to leave a
I'm not
negative
even
one.
gonna address that, because basically I'm saying is that they were leaving not comments about the Airbnb, they were leaving comments about you. You didn't
Not about me.
that.
That's actually not true.
Yeah,
Wait a
that's
minute.
an interesting
Hold on,
thing, too.
not about me, because I'm not running around taking pictures,
But,
and I'm not doing any of that other stuff. The one comment that was left about me was the day that I came out of my back garage, and there was a guy standing in Anna's driveway, looking around going, "This is a real nice place you got back here." After it says in the front, "No residents allowed."
you know, I'm just not gonna, because that happens in my neighborhood too, and I don't even have
So,
an Airbnb.
but that was the negative, but that was the negative comment that was just left 2 weekends ago. And then,
That's
the-
actually-
and then the owners put a negative comment saying, "Well, you started it."
Okay, can we move on though?
So,
with
so that's the
what-
first thing, that's the first thing.
Okay.
Okay? The second thing about it is, it's not our fault as neighbors, as people in the neighborhood, that when it happened in the beginning, the real estate people did not do their due diligence. From the very beginning, the real estate agent who listed the property listed it as a 5-bedroom when it wasn't. That's their problem. Now, the buyer agent, who is you, right? You never looked at a field card or nothing, because I talked to your clients who said they didn't know it was a 4-bedroom and not a 5-bedroom till the day of the closing. Hold on, let me finish. There's also a 12-page decision that goes along with the deed to this property that says that they are also responsible for 1/3 of the maintenance costs of our shared driveway. They knew nothing about it, okay? Just bang, hit them at the last minute, okay? Well, actually, I hit it with them after they bought the place.
If I could say
That's-
something, that's because
wait.
Jennifer, the previous seller, said that you
Wait a minute,
were all the plowing.
Hang on,
That has, that has nothing, plowing has nothing to do with
From
it.
there, if you want to talk, you have to go to the microphone.
But
'cause we don't-
plowing has nothing to do with it. Plowing is just plowing it. Okay, I'll plow it, but you're not, I'm talking about the responsibility of maintaining it. There's a 12-page decision that clearly stated that conservation, the Board of Health, the building inspector said, this has to be a rough gravel road. It has to be maintained by the people that own these properties. It's written in the decision. The first time your clients read it is when I handed it to them saying, we're gonna talk about the condition of our driveway.
Okay,
No,
all right, can we just move
So,
on?
so it's not our problem as the neighbors that the due diligence wasn't done properly. And had they also done their due diligence, they would have read right in it, there's restrictions as far as what can even happen in the neighborhood. These people didn't even know that much.
Okay.
So, if anything, these people, Brenda and Roger, the owners of 50 Spinnaker Way, their problem is really with their lawyer and their real estate people.
In your opinion.
Well, there's such a thing called errors and omissions that I have to carry as a real estate broker.
Okay.
That because of when I screw up like that, I can be sued. So because they didn't do any of that stuff, it actually is the owner's problem that they didn't get it done properly. So now we're voting on whether or not we should order for a continuance based on.
We're not doing a continuous now.
I
We're
mean-
voting on
All right,
whether or not the appeal is granted or rejected.
all right.
We're not doing a continuance.
All right, but either way, it's not the neighbor's fault. What was said in this thing about the neighbors are causing problems, it's not. It's not that at all, because they bought a property that they shouldn't have bought if they were properly notified and given everything that they would needed to get.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just rebut?
Yes, hang on, go ahead.
I just want to say that that was false about the comments on Airbnb. When you leave a comment about where you stayed, it says the owner can't read your comment until they make theirs.
No,
I just did it a week ago where I stayed.
I just did it too. It was the other way around, but anyway.
Okay.
That's kind of a moot point anyway. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Anna Sylvia, 52A Spinnaker Way. Attorney Pellegrini mentioned in the beginning of his conversation this time around that this has been a circus. Well, we didn't bring these monkeys in, we didn't bring these clowns into the neighborhood. Wow. Okay? I have to live in fear since May 13th that I could not get down to my driveway because their guest was parked, not allowing me to get to my property. Because someone stormed out of the house and said, "Get over yourself, B, F yourself," intimidating me. So we're not being the negative people here because we didn't look for this trouble. Because Mrs. Hernandez, which proclaims herself as a professional real estate investor, she should know better. She brings all this crowd in, excessive people week after week, that the reason I take pictures, I do take pictures, for the simple reason I want to be safe in my house. I get down, I get the middle finger. I have never said one word to attendant, a guest of the hotel, Airbnb, short-term rental. I have never told any of their guests where to go like I've been told so. I went on vacation, had to rely on my fellow neighbors to watch my property and stop my mail because I don't know who's in that house. But yet, we're called a circus. We're targeting them. No, we're not targeting them. They're targeting our neighborhood. They're targeting our homes. We live there. They don't belong there. Why didn't she buy 31 Jennings Way at the same time that was for sale? That Spinnaker Way was. Why didn't she bring this circus into her own neighborhood? By the way, Stacy from July 23rd says, "The house is huge and beautiful, and beds were very comfortable. The staging of the house was on point, but was all. There are unfinished areas and all the closets and cabinets are empty. The pool was cloudy and could have used attention. There was a hole on the deck and broken decorations outside, no supplies for fire pit. Unfortunately, our stay was cut short due to a septic backup in the house, and we were forced to leave, which was disappointing because we specifically rented the house for the beach, pool, and vineyard. We missed out on reservations that were made months in advance because we had to relocate over an hour away. The neighbors immediately next to and across from the house have signs protesting. Yeah, because we bought houses that we made homes in a nice, quiet neighborhood like it is advertised. But why? Because we preserve it. We all get along. If we didn't get along, I don't think everybody would be here. If we're that type of bad neighbors, like they're making it seem we are. We're not. If there was a family there, the simple reason that upsets us is because rules are meant to be followed, not broken. Attorney Pellegrini is an attorney. He imposes the law, such as Attorney Blake. I'm sure that when you break a law, there's consequences, either criminally, civil, but there's some sort of repercussion. And what Mrs. Hernandez and Mr. Andrew have done was run a business on a residential area. Don't play the victim that you did not know you were buying a 4-bedroom house thinking it was a 5-bedroom. You do a walk-through. I did when I purchased 52 Spinnaker Way a few hours before the closing. I knew I was buying a 4-bedroom house. And if anything was not of what I agreed on that purchase and sale, I can assure you, Mr. Menard, I would have never signed that closing. So they knew what they were getting into. They just simply lied, and they don't care. They don't contribute positively to the neighborhood. They have done nothing but bring us grief in that neighborhood. I have not enjoyed my summer because I have, excuse me my term, a creepy old man standing in my driveway and I'm coming down the stairs in my undergarment, in my bra per se, excuse me the term, I know it's too much information, but that's what I faced 2 weeks ago. My 23-month-old in my living room, and I'm coming down just, I always do because I'm so far away from my neighbors, nobody can look in my house, but the guy is smacking, oh, I immediately put in my shirt, I open the door and I say, excuse me, who are you looking for? What can I do for you? Oh, I'm just looking about the houses, inquiring the neighborhood. I'm thinking about renting, buying 50 Spinnaker Way. I said, oh, the hotel. Well, I advise you if you have questions, please call their realtor, please call your host. They'll have the answers. Not the houses down here. After my neighbor Tony spent money to put up a sign saying residents only, no trespassing. Not to say the arguments the tenants now are having. I was walking up my daughter's driveway. There was a screaming shout in that house. I should have called the police because there was children in that house. And the tenants there, the windows were open. There were F-bombs everywhere. Like it was going out of style. So we have to put that. But we're the clowns and we're the troublemakers. We're the ones that don't want anyone in the neighborhood. Please sign a purchase agreement. Sell that house to somebody. Have a family come in and live there like we have been living. I've been there for 7 years. But like my neighbors have their house for sale, I damn very well will put mine up. I'm not staying for this nonsense. We can't, this is out of control. We can't take it anymore. And that's why the signs went up. Not because we're targeting them or their business. They just simply don't bring anything positive to us. And we're simply just had enough. I don't feel safe. I don't open up my slider when I'm home alone. And I don't let my daughter out. Because I don't know who are the 12 to 14 people there. I don't. And I can tell you that. I own a house just a bit smaller than that. And my septic has never backed out from 2 people in that house. And they pumped that septic, I believe, I could be wrong, probably last April. So a matter of few months, that septic has backed into the house. That's because there's an excessive amount of people there. And it clearly shows. So they're not the victims here. We're not crying uncle. We're not crying the wolf. Oh, feel bad for us. Make a decision based on our comments. We have presented proof. And I don't know, but the house is rented for 2024. My neighbor just went on Airbnb, and I have it up on Verbo. It's rented for a week in August, and it's rented for a few days in July of '24.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I suggest we put a time limit on comments.
Yes.
Well,
In the interest of our petitioners.
5 minutes.
That's very
have
generous.
much more. I mean, I know things have gotten out of hand and people have definitely said a little bit more than they probably, we shouldn't be calling each other names. I know we all have our own feelings. I know everybody's gotten. I honestly don't think I really have much. Man has said it all. I mean, I can show you right here on my phone. It is booked for next summer. I don't know if that's relevant or not at this point. I think you all know how we feel about this. I just think it's time we figure this out. I mean, none of us would really have a problem with it if it wasn't rented out every single weekend. Do you know what I mean? Like, if our neighbors decided to do it for a couple of months in the summer, that wouldn't be a problem. The problem is how it's being utilized, I think, is the main problem here. And I think that's maybe why we've made it such an issue. Not everybody is renting it how they're renting it. Like, it's literally every single day, every single weekend. It's been like that since February. That's the main problem here. It's not that it's Airbnb and it's being rented. It's the problem of how it's being utilized and the amount of time it's being utilized. And if you come, it's not a typical, it's a neighborhood where we all get along. I know you can read how it reads, but clearly we have some kind of attachment. We're all here supporting each other. You don't have that in a lot of communities. Like, we all say hi to each other, we wave. We don't have a single problem with each other. So I think that, maybe the signs have given that opinion, perhaps. But that's just how strongly we feel that we want to preserve it as a neighborhood. And that's all they say. And I can assure you, not one of us has voiced anything, said anything to any of the renters. I can assure you that. And I would like to see the proof if they have it, because I know in court that, we have to show evidence, not just point fingers. That seems to be going on here. And I know if you guys would like to talk with her afterwards, she has a book full of evidence to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, any other comments from the board before I ask to close the hearing? Okay, I'll entertain a motion then to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All that means is now we don't take inputs from the audience. We may ask questions, but we will deliberate and then make a decision. And again, we got to remind, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You can remind, but I did want to make a
I just want to remind everybody what we're talking about here, and it is very straightforward. Either, and it almost sounds negative, but the petition is that the cease and desist order from the zoning enforcement officer is not a correct interpretation of the bylaws. So if we grant that, what we are saying is that the zoning enforcement officer was wrong in how he enforced the zoning bylaws. If we reject it, we are saying that the zoning enforcement officer correctly enforced the bylaw. So it's kind of a backward voting, but so the 5 members who are going to vote, this any discussion, and again, we're only talking about did the zoning enforcement officer correctly administer the zoning bylaws? And Attorney Blake, you want to add something?
I just wanted to add something, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but frankly, probably everything you heard from the neighbors is irrelevant to what's going on here. In fact, it's not whether or not these folks are good neighbors or bad neighbors, or they're running their business right or they're running their business wrong. It's all about whether or not the short-term rentals are allowed on your bylaw. I think your building inspector has laid it out quite well in his cease and desist letter. So I would suggest that while I understand that there have been accusations made from both sides, it's probably irrelevant to your analysis. You probably didn't need to hear any testimony whatsoever. I think we all agree that the place is being rented on a short-term basis, either VRBO, Airbnb, or the like. And that's all. That's the only facts you need to know.
Right.
Because you didn't issue a special permit that said you can use this for an Airbnb, and then somebody would come in and say, yeah, they can, but they're violating the special permit because they're not doing X, Y, and Z. This is just a flat out. It's really almost a question of law for you to make your determination.
Right.
And can you clarify Chairman's comment that the fact that there's other of these short-term rentals in town is irrelevant to this decision? Because, I mean, that it should be, just because they haven't had complaints doesn't mean we shouldn't be enforcing those as well.
But no, that is correct, and I think the chairman hit it right on the head when he said that this one's the first that's been brought to our attention. To the extent that there are others, this decision could have an impact on all the others.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it's been brought to your attention because, as you pointed out, there was a complaint to the building commissioner.
Right.
And I'm assuming you haven't had any other complaints for short-term rentals in town.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
Discussion.
another question. Attorney Blake, would you suggest or agree that this is relevant to the court case in this Supreme Court in June of 2022?
If you're asking me,
in terms of what is being done there?
Yeah, it does. I mean, this Styler versus the ZBA of Linfield case does have some stuff in here that is very applicable here. For example, your bylaw says, as an allowed use in this district, room rental, boarding for not more than 4 persons in a dwelling. The This case actually looks at that's somewhat like a lodging house or boarding house. This case goes through and actually looks at the definition of what a lodging house is, because that's an argument that was made. And it said, under these kind of circumstances, this isn't a lodging house. This Airbnb, the short-term rentals aren't lodging houses. And there is the notion that this is a commercial use. In the Linfield case, the person actually lived in the building but rented it out for like 13 different times. And even there, deferring to the board, because that's what a court will do, will defer to the ZBA, who interpret this as not an accessory use to a residential, but rather as a primary use, said that it didn't meet the bylaw. Here, it's even stronger, I think, because there's nobody living. This is strictly for this purpose. It's not, I live there most of the time, but I rent it out occasionally. So I think it's a stronger case than the Linfield case.
And there's going to be one more comment. Since this is an administrative appeal, it will take 4 positive votes to grant the petitioner. So, again, any discussion? All right, I'm going to do like I did before. I am going to make a motion, and again, this is just a motion, to grant, and then I have to read it. Make sure I get the right one. To grant the appeal of Spinnaker Way LLC administrative appeal from the cease and desist order of the building commissioner dated June 29, 2023, that the use of the property at 50 Spinnaker Way for a short-term rental is not allowed in a residential agricultural zoning district as mandated by zoning bylaw, Article 5, Section 5.1. Subject is located at 50 Spinnaker Way, Westport, Mass, and is shown on the Assessor's Map, lot 22, lots 2Y and 20K. So again, I made a motion. Would somebody make a second? We will then discuss it before we vote, and we will make sure that we understand what it is we're voting on before we actually take a vote.
I'll second.
I have a second. Okay, I have a motion and a second to grant the petition. Now, discussion. Right, and I think, personally, I think Attorney Blake pretty much spelled it out. I mean, I think it's very straightforward. If you read our zoning bylaws, it says that if you're not specifically allowed to do something, then you can't do it. Since short-term rentals are not specifically allowed, our zoning bylaws don't allow it. Any other discussion?
Would you just clarify, so we all know, and everyone else knows, if a positive vote?
Okay, then that's what I'm getting to next, right. So we have a motion and a second. If you vote in the affirmative, you are voting saying that the petitioner is correct, saying that the zoning enforcement officer erroneously administered the zoning bylaw. If you vote to reject, a negative vote on granting, then you're saying that the zoning enforcement officer was correct in his interpretation. So, everybody understand that?
Yes.
So all those in favor of granting the petition, raise your hand. All those in favor of rejecting the petition, raise your hand. And it is unanimous. You have a 20-day appeal period. And since as part of this hearing, then the cease and desist order remains in effect.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your time.
Attorney Blake, thank you for being here. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I always enjoy coming down and seeing.
Right.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. When we see you, we know it's a tough case.
The next, so everybody, you can leave if you're not here for the. Okay.
Good luck.
The next is, are we doing his speech?
I I think you should.
Well, it's next up if we did, so we're gonna do 118 East Beach Road. Dwight Sylvia for a variance from the setback requirement. Oh, matter of fact, Attorney Blake, do you think you can stay around for a little longer?
I think the next one might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, tricky.
I think this is gonna be fast, so we shouldn't let this forward stay in about it.
181.
I went to 118
181. I went to
today
118.
first.
181.
And said, yeah, I'm getting a little dyslexic. in
Okay,
the
it's
middle.
181, so variance for the setback.
118.
It's 181.
181.
This is wrong then.
Yeah, the bottom, you keep reading it. Yeah, I did the same thing.
That's
In
why I went
removing
to
an
the wrong
existing shed
property.
6 by 8 and construct on a 10 by 16 shed with 6 by 10 attached deck with a setback of 5 feet from the eastern property line as mandated by zoning bylaw Article 7, Section 772. The property is located at 181 East Beach Road, Westport, Mass. and is shown on Assessors Maps 76A, Lot 86. And let me get that one out so I can. Okay, that's all of this away. And it's not that one, it's not that one. Okay. That's vinegar,
Yep.
that's vinegar, that's vinegar. Okay,
Now, is this okay over here?
Okay, I'm going to start by reading a letter from the zoning enforcement officer. Dear Mr. Sylvia, after review of an engineering site plan of your property at 181 East Beach Road, Westport, Mass., it was noticed that you have a 160 square foot shed with an attached 60-foot deck in violation of the Westport zoning bylaws, Article 772, side yards. The required setback is 10 feet in clear width between the side of the building or structure and the side of lot lines. In order for a building permit to be issued for the combination shed deck, the structure in question will need to be either granted or a variance from the Board of Appeals or the structure moved to the correct side yard setback. So that's what prompted this. And again, the process will be the same. I'll let the petitioner present whatever information is pertinent. The board will then ask questions. Once the board has finished, I'll open it up to the general public. So, name and address. And you have to speak somewhere with, why don't you pull that microphone up and you can speak anywhere. Back to one standing up there.
I'll give you an extra one.
Good evening. My name is Allison Caesar. I'm with Civil and Environmental Consultants located at 31 Bellows Road, Raynham, Massachusetts. Here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Dwight Sylvia, who wanted to get approval for this 10 by 16 shed, as well as the attached deck. We understand that the setback requirement has not been met. He, I guess, was in talks with his neighbor and they agreed that the new structure should be where the old one was. And I just want to apologize that the plans never made it to you guys. I'd be happy to bring you them after today. The house is situated on East Beach Road, across the road from Horseneck Beach, and he's just looking to have that there for potable water storage. I'd like to open the discussion to the board.
We got one question for Ralph. This is non-conforming property, correct?
Existing non-conforming.
So
And is it existing
why isn't this then
non-conforming shed?
a finding rather than a variance?
closer than the setbacks allow. Setbacks will allow 10 feet.
Could be
What
both.
was there before went away.
It-
It went away.
Oh, it went away.
No proof of where it was.
Oh, okay,
Well, it just went away.
okay.
Talk to me about the shed. The shed under, on a residential side, a shed under 200 square feet doesn't have to comply with the, doesn't need a permit. Doesn't-
Right. But it still needs,
has to comply with setbacks.
right.
This structure and shed exceed the 200, this structure's going to now need a building permit.
Oh, okay,
So I can't issue a building permit with where it is.
okay. Now, if the structure had been there,
If
they
the
were
structure
replacing
and
it,
they had it documented that it was there, and this is what we're doing, it would have been different.
it could have been a finding at that
It
point.
could have been a finding at that.
Okay, I just want to clarify that because I make, that's a big difference in how we.
The shed went away.
Okay, okay. Okay, why does it have to be in that spot?
I guess it was something that he and the neighbor were in talks with about that being the proper spot for it, since there was already a shed there that they removed. I believe the applicant may have not understood the regulation on this and thought that he was just replacing what was there with something a little more sustainable for the use that he's trying to get out of it. It's to shield his water storage from the elements. It's, I understand it exceeds the allowable limits for construction, and he, should have come before the building commissioner and discussed this ahead of time. But he is now in the process of a notice of intent with the with the Conservation Commission. And this is one of the requirements in order to continue the use for that shed and get approval.
I have a question for you. This plan that I have here is dated December of 2022. And it says in very light lettering, existing shed to be removed. Now, was it there in December of 2022?
I unfortunately couldn't confirm that.
It was my understanding it wasn't.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I'm not sure, unfortunately.
I have a question for Ralph. The new shed is 220 square feet
The new shed combined
with the deck.
with the decks, now it's a one structure because they're tied together, so it's considered one structure.
So you need a
Now,
building
now
permit.
you need a building.
If this was 190 square feet, would we be here tonight?
Yes.
We would.
Yes.
Still would be.
For the setback.
Because
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 of
The
the
setback.
setback, because again,
Okay.
the old shed went away.
Okay.
There was no proof where the old shed was.
Ah, right, okay.
I will say that we had done, I used to work for SciTech, and we had originally done a lot of the on-site work. And according to our record plans, that shed did exist. But again, I wouldn't have that readily available for tonight. I'd have to do some digging to fish that
But in any
out.
event, the shed went away. So
Correct.
in the recent past, there has been no shed there. You're starting from scratch.
So,
I'm still curious as to why that spot. Why couldn't it be moved 5 feet, 4 feet, being so that you don't violate zoning bylaw?
I can certainly ask the applicant to answer that. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight, so he sent me instead. But I'd be happy to have that discussion with him and get you a real answer to that, along with the
Well,
plans.
in order, and also, in order to approve a variance, we need to know what the, okay. Jerry, what's the right word we use for that?
what's that? Oh, hardship?
Hardship.
Oh.
In order to approve, if you looked at the bylaws for a variance, you need to identify a hardship. And the hardship is not a monetary one. It has to be based on something to do with the land. There's a stream, there's a rock, there's ledge, there's something that forces you to use that particular area and no other area. So what's the hardship?
The hardship being that he
That's
really.
where they want it.
Yeah. The hardship being that this is a pre-existing non-conforming lot. There wasn't a whole lot of space on the side. I'm sure that a lot of the thought that went into it was probably for aesthetic preservation, as this is on a beach road. It's a scenic area. I think he was thinking, get it away from the road since it's going to be used for potable water source.
Is it possible to have a 10-foot setback?
No. That's what I was
Looks
coming
like
up to
you'd
see.
be
It's so,
hitting
here, it's only 4 feet from the house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the building.
No.
No.
Oh,
No, there's
canopy.
plenty of room.
Yeah.
Canopy, okay. No, it's 8 feet then, right? 4 feet here?
So
4
this
feet
is
there.
the enclosed structure.
Cynthia, there's plenty of room.
Okay. I just can't, I just couldn't see it from.
I went to see it today. I mean, it's off to the corner. There's plenty of room. It could have been closer to the main house.
You only have to move it 4 feet over.
Right, because it's on an angle, and this is a straight line, right?
So it's just that-
It's not like it's a weird property line like my house. That they could just twist it, and then it probably, do you know what this distance is from the deck to here?
That's probably over 10 feet.
Right, so, I would suggest,
Just straighten it out.
yeah.
And why a deck?
So that they could install a shower. The land area is all sand and whatnot, so keep them clean.
If it was just to put water in, it's an awfully big place to keep water in, but would you really need a deck overlooking the wetlands? Would you need I mean, I don't quite understand why that's.
And you should have noted, you should have hit me over the head again.
Right.
Vote on this will be
Oh.
Jerry Catino, Barbara Pontilillo, myself, Roger Menard, Constance Gay, and Ray Elias. And this is a variance which requires a vote of 4 out of 5 members.
It just, I don't know, it seems like a case of doing what we want and asking, easier to ask forgiveness than permission.
I think it didn't seem like he really understood the process. I was explaining it to him. He had really no knowledge of the zoning board of appeals and how it really worked for this kind of use. I think he thought, well, there was an existing shed. I'm just going to replace it with another shed. So not the right thing to do, clearly, but that is where we are today, unfortunately.
Can you explain a little bit more about the Conservation Committee and requiring the water source to begin with? I mean, I know where it is, it probably has no water, right? Right. And the Conservation Committee wouldn't want the water underneath the pilings?
So I don't know the entire extent of the structure that goes inside of the shed. I have not seen it. I've not seen plans for it or anything like that. But the Conservation Commission is making their review of the site contingent upon an approval from the ZBA, because they don't want to approve something that's obviously going against the town's regulations.
Now, was the size of the new shed and deck larger than the other one, and sold by about how much?
It says in
Yeah,
the
they,
thing.
The present one's
Yeah.
220 square feet.
So this one's 220 square feet. I forget the exact
6 by
square
8.
footage. There you
Looks
go.
like it to me.
That's what needs to be.
Right, the original was 6 by 8.
But it doesn't exist, so how do we know
Yeah.
that?
Right.
Yeah,
The one that
it's like
doesn't
elevated
exist
like
was
that
6 by
much.
8.
Yeah.
But
how
it
do we-
potentially is
How do we
only-
know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is,
Well, the reason I'm asking that is you said that you had your plans at SciTech, you had some old plans and it showed in existence at some point in time.
Some point,
A
yeah.
6 by 8
Right.
shed.
Right.
So I don't know if that carries any weight or not.
And that would be something I'd be willing to bring to you guys as well for your review.
questions from the board before I open to the public? Anybody in the audience? No?
This is in the flood zone one?
It is, yeah.
East Beach?
No, just make sure it's elevated, that's all.
It is, it's only the few that are.
We don't
All
have a
the
plan in
stru-
front of us that shows it, so.
And all the structures are built on pilings as well, so that the coastal dune can function the way it's supposed to.
Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll ask for a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
I'll second that.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Okay, again, at this point, we will discuss it. I don't see where we can possibly approve this. There's no reason for the hazard, there's no reason why it has to be where it is. I find it really hard to grant a variance just because somebody wanted to stick it somewhere. Now, if they had, and that's the reason why I asked Ralph in the beginning, if there was a shed already there, then it wouldn't be a variance, it would be a finding, and that would be a totally different. But the shed not being there, you're starting from scratch, you can put it anywhere you want. So put it somewhere that meets our variance requirements, our setback requirements.
And also get a building permit if it's going to be bigger than.
Well,
Well, that's what they're just trying
Right.
to do.
Yeah.
It's possible
already built.
that even if it weren't, it's possible that they may
It's already
still have
built.
needed a variance depending
I don't think
on
they
where
did.
they wanted to put
They did.
that in relationship to where the other shed was. So it's possible that there could have been a requirement for variance as well, if it was a different variance.
Well, they actually kind of show it, and the way they show it,
Yeah, but
they didn't make it go any closer.
yeah, but
So,
closer than what?
well, I mean, they show the red dotted, the red thing
Right.
here.
But
So
it's not there, so how do you know?
I'm saying if that's where it was,
If that's
if
right.
that's where it was, then we could have considered a finding.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah,
I mean, because that would have been a whole different situation, but it would have been a different process.
because they were not introducing any new.
Yes, new
setback.
nonconformities.
Right.
But everybody
No.
realizes it's already there, right? It's
Well, that's-
already built.
that's kind of-
Everybody,
Kind of beside the point, but
it's
no.
a done deal.
Well, it's not, I would have it tear it down.
Move it.
Right, but I'm saying it's there with the deck.
Any other comments? I mean, the thing, we always discuss here is what's driving putting it there. And if there was a reason for it, if there was a rock, if there was a stream, if there was a ledge, if there was some reason that the only spot it would exist, then that's a valid reason for a variance.
I think the only reason he really had was just to minimize disturbance to the land. And if it
Well, I
wasn't
think they put it there
some-
because that's where it used to be.
Yeah.
Discussion. Once again, this is kind of like one of those negative ones. I'll make a motion, and again, this is if I make a motion to grant, what that is saying is that we are granting the variance and they can put it wherever they want. If you vote yes to grant, then you are voting yes to the variance. If you vote nay on granting, then you are saying that the variance is not allowed. So I'm going to make a motion to grant the variance for a setback requirement in removing the existing shed and construct a 10 by 16 shed and 6 by 10 attached deck with a setback
I did want to
of
ask.
5 feet from the property line as mandated by zoning bylaw Article 7, Section 7.7.2. You can't add, we're discussing.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'll second.
Okay, now again, does everybody understand what the vote? So we have a motion to grant and a second to grant. Anybody want to discuss it before I take a vote? Does everybody understand what the impact of the vote is? Okay, all in favor of granting the variance, raise your hand. All opposed? Let the record show it's unanimous.
By the way,
There is a 20-day appeal period,
I
in
feel
which
it's
case
because there
then
was no
this...
hardship.
Right.
Right.
The reason being.
Reason is,
there was no
right,
hardship.
and the reason being, no hardship identified.
So what happens?
Ralph, what happens?
Just gotta move it.
Move it.
It's out as a
20
nail.
Get in there with a backhoe and-
It's over, then you gotta move it, I go check if he hasn't moved it, I said, I'll let him move it.
And they have to apply for a building permit, right? They've
They have to do
already built
that,
it.
yeah.
Tear it down. Yeah. It's not tax, it'd be on record that it's pulling down, so we'll have to get a building permit. Unless he wants to move it, make it comply. That's his
Okay,
option, just tear
thank
it
you.
down, or
Thank you.
make it.
Okay, the third and last, and again, Attorney Drake, if you stay for this one as well.
Might as well.
I mean, it's in for a penny, in for a pound,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay, this is an application of Casey Amaral for a variance to continue use of the residential building known as 581C Drift Road, Westport, Mass., which will not be detrimental to the public good, will not impact the integrity of character to the neighborhood, nor negatively impact abutting properties, and require no structural changes, and would otherwise cause substantial hardship to the applicant as mandated by zoning bylaw Article 5, Section 5.1. So this is a variance, again, and the variance, and let's see, believe, hang on a second. Do we have a letter from Ralph in this one? No? Okay. Again, voting on this will be Jerry Patino, Barbara Pontilillo, myself, Raj Menard, Constance Gee, and Ray Elias. And since it's a variance, it will require 4 affirmative votes to grant the variance. And in the same process, the petitioner or petitioner's representative will make his case, will ask questions, and then I'll open it up to the public.
Thank you, sir. And again, my name is Vince Cragen. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Casey Amaral. My address, business address, 432 County Street in New Bedford. As you indicated, Mr. Chair, we're here tonight for a variance for 581C Drift Road here in Westport. This is the, you're familiar with this matter, I know.
Yes.
This is the property where there are 2 homes on it being rented out by, the owner doesn't live at the premises, 2 homes there being rented out. And the issue is the smaller of the 2, 581C. It's a smaller home. It's been lived in for decades. I know when the applicant was before the board back prior, the board asked that it come back with a variance, seeking a variance, basically to show that the property was used prior to the institution of zoning to the locus as a residence at that time. And we provided some correspondence in there indicating that that's the case. I also cited in the application the date that zoning was instituted for the locus, which was the date in 1973. I cite the actual, I think it's page 149 and 150 of the zoning bylaws, or May 2023 bylaws, showing the explanation of what sections were added to the zoning bylaw to show when the property went into, when it started to be covered by zoning.
Well, actually, none of that is actually true. Because we made a ruling back in 2018 that broke that property up, which made it into now 2 new parcels, both of which were now subject to the current zoning bylaws. Isn't that correct, Attorney Blake?
I think it would be at that point, if you broke it up and at the time you broke it up, they were buildable lots, then they would be buildable lots, and or they would be subject to the then.
They would be subject to the zoning bylaws at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, this was in 2018.
Right, and that's why we're here before variance. We're not saying that they are currently conforming. They're pre-existing, non-conforming property. Totally get that, and that's, as you indicated at the hearing last time, to come back to find out, you wanted some indication whether somebody lived in the structure as a residence prior to the institution of zoning, and that we've done. We have people here who will speak to that tonight, and that's what we've done. And as far as the hardship you indicated in the last one, this property is kind of unique, the shape of it, but also the topography.
Can I just interrupt here?
Oh, sure.
You're going on to another area.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what was said.
Certainly.
I can't remember every single thing that was done in that hearing,
No.
but I do remember the result of it was sort of a compromise that we actually
Yes.
made on that, with the condition that he removed the livability of that, and he said, "Oh, I've got a veteran living there, and please let him stay for a while," to you, something like that. I don't remember the details.
And thank you, sir. I do disagree with that component of it, because I've watched it on YouTube, watched it a couple of times, and you're right, when it ended, there was a conclusion to withdraw, and that's, and I believe.
Correct.
Mr. Menard, you're the one who said to come back and find out, we would like to know when the property was first lived in as a residence, and that's what we're doing. But there's definitely not a condition about, I listened to it to the end, unless I missed something, I'm pretty sure I didn't, about.
Making one.
Right, in the
livable?
interim, correct.
Okay,
correct.
but
And-
I'm going to go back to the
I'm gonna wanna
2018
look
decision.
back
Yeah.
in the records.
Definitely, sir.
When
Yeah.
there was Mrs. Amaral at the time.
Right.
Mary?
Joan.
Joan, came to us to break the property up so
Right.
that she could live in the back and sell it, and
Right.
we, again, we bent over backwards to make that happen. But one of the main conditions was that the structure on Lot 1, identified as 581C, shall not be used as a residential dwelling, and any and all kitchen facilities must be completely removed, never exist in the future unless legally allowed. Now, they didn't do that.
Right, and this came up at the last hearing. This
Yeah.
was already hushed, not hushed, flushed out,
So-
exactly. No.
The petitioner agreed, as part of our decision, that structure would no longer be used as a residence.
Right.
Yeah, it would be, the kitchen would be removed, and it would just be a storage house or whatever.
Right.
And that was our decision in 2018.
Right.
So now what you want us to do is essentially, you want us to reverse our decision from 2018.
Right, and when Mr. Amaral was here back in 2022, that issue this was all flushed out, and then it concluded by saying, okay, let's see if we can come back with a variance, finding out when was someone first living there. That's what we're here to show, when someone was someone living there as a residence prior to the institution.
I do
itself.
not recall that part of the discussion at all. I won't
Yeah.
say it didn't take
Yeah.
place. I'm getting older.
Yeah, no, that's-
I know it, but,
No.
but I don't recall that part at
No,
all.
it did.
It did, yeah, I
It
thought,
did, because we were treating
About asking them to
father,
come
we were
back for a
treating
variance?
Mrs. Amaral and Mr. Amaral as a family, and technically it's a new owner.
Right.
And I thought placing restrictions bringing all the stuff up from Mrs. Amaral's case prior to the sale of the property, we should treat it as a sale, and treat it as a different owner and not as.
So are you saying that we did what he said, and that is that we allowed them to withdraw?
Right, you
With,
had-
wait a minute, I mean, with the idea that they would come back for a variance after proving that somebody lived there?
Right, because you had also said you requested that in the original hearing of Mrs. Amaral, and they never came up with that proof.
And I believe what we said is that what they were applying for was not valid, but there may be other avenues that would be valid.
Yes.
Right, and we're here, and that's why
And
we're
you're
here.
now looking at the other avenue that might be valid.
Correct. Via
And then
the
we have to
variance.
agree of whether or not that is actually a valid.
Avenue.
Right, and again, that's why as you mentioned, yes, I remember here, again, I watched it on YouTube, I wasn't here, but everything that you said is correct. Flushing out the separate issues, and we're coming back as you requested, seeking a variance. We know that we have proof that people were living there at the time of the institution of zoning for the locus. And additionally, the property is being rented by someone who is able to live local to his parents. If that person would have to be kicked out, it's basically, as Mr. Amaral testified the last time, it's not paying that much in rent, just a little bit more than breaking even. The person will have to find there's a lack of affordable housing throughout the region, as we all know. It would just cause problems. And for Mr. Amaral, as was brought up before, he brought the property his mother had it for sale, it couldn't sell, so he bought it to kind of relieve her of that pressure. He's a hard worker. He can't live there at this time. His family's situated and everything, and he's not in there to make a lot of money. As he testified before, he just charges a reasonable rate of rent. And also, it's not disruptive to the neighborhood. We're not asking for anything different. We're not asking for a new situation. This has been there for decades. The person's been living there for decades. So we're really asking for continuation of the status quo through the avenue of a variance.
Right,
I'd like to
Can I-
read from the...
Can I do this first?
Yeah.
First of all, there were a couple of letters that I would like to read into the record from neighbors.
Sure.
My name is Jennifer Mulvey Leet, and I live at 561 Drift Road. I have been a neighbor to the Amarals for almost 20 years. In my time there, I have never had an issue with the family or property lines, etc. They have been great neighbors through snowstorms, hurricanes, and fair weather. They have vetted their tenants, and I have always found them to be respectful. I have no objections to the request. If you want to talk to me directly, I can be reached at, whatever. And the second is, to whom it may concern, a tax assessor in the town of Westport for 40 years. In that time, the property at 581C Drift Road, in the past owned by Paul and Joan Amaral, and now owned by their son, has always been a dwelling and always been taxed as a dwelling. One other comment, though, is that what you essentially have on that property now is a main house and an accessory house. We have bylaws that cover that. And the bylaw that covers that, though, requires that the owner has to live in one of those. So if the
Right.
owner lived in one of those, then you wouldn't be here tonight.
Right.
We would be instead doing a special permit as an accessory apartment.
Which is correct, sir, and that's what Mr. Amaral was here before the last hearing, was a special, exactly for that, for a special permit to deal with the accessory.
Except
Right,
that
but you
we're
get-
going to live there.
Right, but hence, that's why he was seeking the special permit. And that's when it was concluded towards the end of the hearing.
Here for the wrong reason.
Yes, I remember you said apples and oranges, we're doing apples and oranges, and then, and it was concluded that the variance seemed to be the best avenue, again, showing that someone has lived there since prior to the institution of zoning.
Mr. Chairman, could I
Yep,
read?
go ahead, now you can go.
Okay. This is our actual decision, November 7, 2022. The application was for a special permit and/or variance to convert existing detached structure into detached one-bedroom accessory apartment, blah, blah, blah. The last page of the decision, I'm just going to excerpt from it. Let's see. Cynthia agreed that the petitioner must provide proof that the structure was an apartment prior to zoning changes that prohibit more than one residence on a lot. Okay, so maybe you're prepared to do that. I suggested that the relief would be a variance from the original bylaw that mandates that there can be no more than one single-family dwelling on a residence on a lot. Cynthia indicated that she believes it would be difficult to grant a variance from the conditions of section 9.5.3 due to the fact that he does not plan to reside at the main house. That's factual. Mr. Amaral said that there has been some research that farmers from Idaho resided in the main house and utilized a structure that is currently being rented as an apartment. Joan Amaral stated that a fisherman resided in that structure years ago as well. Mr. Amaral said that he has documents such as leases that he can provide to the board to show that people resided in the structure his entire life. Chair Menard said that Mr. Amaral has two options. The board could vote on the relief that he's requesting, which is the variance or whatever, or he could withdraw the petition without prejudice, and he could submit a new petition at any time. Now, it doesn't say that he could come back and look for a variance. It just says in the petition. In other words, you've got to change it to make it worthwhile. If the board votes on the petition and rejects the petition, then the accessory apartment is not allowed. And that's what we did. So I think that was a little different than what's being presented. Because the fact that those people live there, everybody in this room could say that. That doesn't say it was legal. Okay? So that's the thing I think we could address.
Anything else?
I mean, that's basically, like I said, the board asks us to come back, we've come back. We're asking, we acknowledge, obviously, there's no secret, there are two residences on one lot. That was the case prior to the institution of zoning there in 1973.
So, but your basis for that is primarily on, it's always been used that way.
Yes, and as the board asked, that's why we're doing it on this avenue. You suggested that we come back showing that someone has lived there prior to the institution of zoning.
That really wasn't what we asked, but that's.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube, but I can get the, this isn't, I don't disagree with what Chairman saying, this is not an exact transcript, but that's.
How about what Mr. Souza, let me interrupt you out there. Ralph, hasn't there been some discussion with you over the past years about getting rid of the habitability of that?
You mentioned what he needed to do to get rid of the habitability, get rid of the kitchen. Get rid of the kitchen in the building, so the building will be an accessory building to everything else.
Haven't we asked for that information before, tried to?
I think in the original, when it was still owned by Mrs. Emerald, I think we were asking for some proof that it was actually always two. I don't remember that because I wasn't around yet, but I think you had suggested that's what you had asked in the original.
I mean, there was a lot involved. That was a very complicated situation. They were trying to get to, the driveway.
Right.
And the wells in between the thing, and then there was other issues. They came back later and wanted to move the driveway that they had asked for in the first place. And so there was a lot of complications. I don't remember all the details of it, but it was not a simple thing.
It seems to me like we had to follow up with this, right?
Yeah.
A couple of times.
Yes.
Well, we tried to.
Yeah, nobody ever got back with us.
Yeah, because we made a ruling and a decision that the access, that 581C would not become a residential dwelling, and the complete removal of the kitchen would be performed, and obviously it never was.
It never happened.
But that was in 2018.
Yes.
That's before my time. But I've done research in this, and I've only been around since 1971. And this guy says he's been here 40 years, and I do know him, and I can shake his hand. He's paying taxes on this building. And it's been all the way back to then. And my neighbor is George Smith. He came over with the Pilgrims, I think. I'm not even sure of that, but.
And he must be 200-something years old.
Yeah, and he says there's been somebody there. And I can shake George Smith's hand and say, I believe you.
Well, that's not the issue.
We had this gentleman here 3 times already since I've been here. And this all started in 2018, which was probably wrong. He's trying to make it right. That's what I think. I'm probably already said too much.
That's okay.
And again, it was
Mrs.
Emerald who was requested to remove the kitchen and did it.
Right. And then when he didn't, we took him, Ralph told him he had to, and they came back to us with a petition that really wasn't appropriate for what he wanted to do, and now we're back again. So we're still,
Around and around and around.
I'll get to the audience in a minute.
That was my first case on the ZBA. I do remember the details of this one.
And you probably sat right there too.
No, other room. We were in the other
Oh, we were in
room.
the other room, yes, okay. Any other questions of the petitioner before you open
Was
it?
I guess, do you have proof or not, or lack thereof of the decision by you in 2018 being recorded?
Oh, I have it.
Yeah. So it was recorded with it was recorded with the registry of deeds? So any new owner would have known, okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony Vieira, 8 Kelly Avenue, Westport. And I appreciate what you people are doing here. This is a tough situation, and you are right on what you said. I read through the material. I watched the tapes. I went back and did some history. 77 years gives you kind of an opportunity to review things in the long term. Westport's always had a number of small sheds, if you would, almost, because of the farming and fishing community. People have lived in those areas as part of their employment in some cases, just to maintain the property, maintain the animals, secure that. There's a long history there. I know that house personally because that was my aunt's house. And I know when she first moved in, because we were down there as a family talking to him about that. Fast forward, a lot's happened since. The one constant in this whole deal, till about, from 1950 to now, has been the same family. And I experienced that personally. There has been in zoning, prior to zoning, grandfather clauses and recognitions of families that lived in Westport on what they were doing with the properties, and if they were requirements because there was health issues, if there were requirements because of septic issues, if there were requirements because of size of the property. We have examples of 4 Main Road. Jerry knows that personally. I know that personally because it was in my family before it was in Jerry's, and Jerry owned it. We have examples of down in Holly Avenue. I know that personally. Ray does because he's part of that, and Route 88 cut all those farms. But in that era, most of the farming requirement had people working there. They had those types of properties. My aunt, Virginia, and her husband bought that property and lived in there and raised a family there. My 2 cousins lived there when they first got married. And it was only after Joan, who lost my cousin Paul, was faced with coming to the planning board and trying to see how she can manage that and keep that somewhat, at least part of that property, in the family name. They tried to do that to the best of their ability, and you folks tried to help them. It's obvious that you were working with them. I don't fault the board or members of the board and what they were trying to do, but the property has really stayed in the family. If it was sold, we wouldn't be here tonight, and we would have moved on, but it wasn't sold. All good intentions.
We would be arguing with this with somebody else.
I don't think so, because I think the commitment was made. As it's made with grandfather clauses, when families need to upgrade, if it's a public safety issue, you have to upgrade immediately. We can all research grandfather clauses in history. Jeff, I worked with you many years on this. I worked with Ralph many years, and we've worked together, and we've talked to families about the need if it's a public safety situation. But if it stayed in the family and it's undersized, or if there's a problem with the property, we'd still try to get an upgrade with that same family. There's a long history of that. All I'm asking you is some consideration for this family situation. This kid has worked very hard. He's not a kid anymore, but he's worked very hard in maintaining it in the family. I respect that, and I hope our community would too. All we're saying is, if he sells it, he knows, and I'm sure he would write down that he would sell it based on the new conditions in the zoning, but it's in the family. I drove by that. I said, I don't understand what's happening here, because of the property. Maybe it's not being kept well or something. I mean, it's probably the best that I've seen for a single resident living in there, those small little homes. You know, does anybody know of a better place in town? And it's reasonable, and it's affordable. So if you've got somebody that's working in the fishing industry now, if you've got somebody that's working in Nookchoke, and it has been over the years, we're old enough to know that, Jerry. When you got out of the service, when you were at UMass, there were people living there that were working over at Nookchoke and working on the farms down the road, on Sousa's farm and Henry Aruta's farm. There's a whole history there. We've got an assessor who's been there for 40 years and has agreed that they paid as a dwelling for 40 years. Nobody's been hiding this. There are places in town that are hiding it. We all know it. But they're not here tonight. We're just talking about this one request from a family that's saying, can we continue it as is for now? We'll continue to pay taxes. We're going to maintain it. You can see the quality of it. I'm sure you people have driven by and seen it yourself. It's a really nice piece of property. And those individual homes, the people that are there are very appreciative. They probably wouldn't have the jobs they had if it wasn't for that being there, and so they could live close to their jobs. In the old days, it was required. You couldn't get in town. If you're going to do a farming situation, if you're doing market gardening, you got to be over in Providence with the produce at 7 o'clock in the morning. You can't be living in Fall River, New Bedford. You're going to be living there. If you're doing farming, you're going to be there early in the morning too. That's what lends itself to those types of properties. And they were year-round, at least. Maybe they were off in December and January in some cases, but the rest of the year they were there. All we're saying is we can provide that within our community to a limited degree right now, and this is an example of probably the best one that we could use as an example if we're moving forward with this in certain areas. And please give it some consideration. If they have to change things around going forward, I think they would sign that in a heartbeat. If it was sold, I don't think you'd be here today. But you're right, people had made a commitment to you, and it didn't go that way because it was not sold. That's the only reason. So what's the alternative now? To force them to sell it to somebody else, knock those buildings down, have a McMansion in there across from an orchard? I mean, please be reasonable with it and consider it. Again, I apologize for preaching a little bit, but it's personal. And our community is personal, and I hope it stays that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to comment that.
Name and address, please.
Oh, Ann Boxler, 1 Fox Lane. I was here for that last meeting, and everyone was really trying to work really hard to help him. I distinctly remember members of your committee getting up and explaining to him that if they could prove that before the zoning board laws went into effect that pertain to this argument, if they could prove that someone had already lived in there, then they thought that there was something. And no one, I agree, no one promised him anything, no one, but the feelings in the room were a lot more, let's try to help this family from Westport, as opposed to now that it feels like really, well, you know what, we're done. And it's kind of disheartening for him, because it's been a couple months since the last one, and we just keep dragging it on for him. And without a doubt, the feeling in this room was that we were going to work with him, and let's see, no promises, but if we can show that someone lived there before the zoning board that pertained when law went into effect, that we could probably do something. And that's all.
Thank you.
My name's Carl Ramrod. I live at 850 Pleasant Street, New Bedford. I can testify too that there's been someone living in that dwelling for 50 years that I know that people have been living there, that I personally can testify. I myself lived there for a period of time in the early 80s. I know an uncle lived there. There's been somebody there for 50 years.
Thank you. Anyone else?
When was the zoning change? When was the zoning change? Was it 62?
74.
Okay. So we're just coming up to 50 years.
If everybody knew all this, why wasn't this stated and brought out back when we were?
Any other questions, comments before a...
Well, I'll say this, I wouldn't want to act on this tonight, because I'm just hearing this, all verbal, so forth. I'd like to have an opportunity to go back and look at what has been done by us, and what kind of discussion took place, and look at and get that perspective. And I suggest that we never asked them to come in and seek a variance. We may have suggested that is a possibility they could try to do, but I don't want to make it appear as though we asked them to do it, like it would be okay. It seems to me there were also issues, and again, just my memory, that there were issues as to the legality of the buildings. They were built without permits and things like that. I just know vaguely about that. So I'd like to have an opportunity to kind of look back at that and see. It seems to me, I don't know what the compromise would have been, but it seems to me that it was like, if we do this, then and you do this, we'll be okay. And part of the you do this was what you read, was that building was going to be non-habitable. And there had to be a decent reason for that. We don't just say that. So I would like to have the opportunity to go back and look at the stuff clearly and see what I could see with the hearings and what's in the written materials.
Does the attorney have any documentation that says that, that proves any of this?
Well, we have Carla's Emerald's letter, and she just spoke to verify that. Again, the issue being that someone lived there. We have the former assessor indicating over 4 years someone's living there. We had Mr. Vieira's testimony that someone's living there well in excess of 40 years.
I really hate to delay this again, because my main issue is very straightforward. We made a decision in 2018 that was not followed. And what you're asking us then is to renege on, essentially to change our decision from 2018 in which the owner agreed to make that property non-livable and never did.
That's not who's in front of us right now.
It is, the decision goes to the property, it doesn't
Yeah.
go to the person. So whoever owns that property has to, and Attorney Blake, tell me if I'm right or wrong.
You're correct.
So it is not a Joan Amaral decision, it is a 581C Drift Road decision. So
Right,
anybody who has that property has to abide by that decision.
But I also think some of the tension that I think Ann referred to right now is going back to that 2018. And I think what I had suggested to the board in 2022, or early 2023, that we would allow him to at least do a good faith effort to try to, give him a clean slate and see if he could actually give us some proof that it had always been a building and that we didn't need a building. You were concerned about the building permits.
Was there any building permits after this?
They-
Rob?
Not after.
No,
For that
David.
building, no.
Been done?
Not for that one.
no.
But there've been, I believe there've been inspections, obviously.
Yes, but
It's
well, yeah.
not, and it's pristine
So,
as
but
testified.
again, if we were to approve this variant, we are essentially negating a decision that we previous made in good faith.
Well, based on other stuff that was presented to us at that.
If we made a decision,
All right.
and none of that has changed. And we worked really hard with the petitioner at that time to arrive at that decision. I mean, we could have, at that point, refused that particular petition because we had to, we bent over backwards to make it work for the family.
One clarification though, I want to check. You just said and the owner agreed to
Well, they
take
had-
that.
yes.
Is that in there? Because I don't recall. That's why I want to look at the stuff because,
But you never, that's,
but I didn't know. I mean, if he agreed and then backed out of that, then that's.
well, what happened, I believe, is, yes, there was agreed, we have a signed decision. When it transferred, when the son bought it, that information probably wasn't transferred over to the son. I don't know if that's the case or not, but but in any case, the decision is binding on the property, not on the person.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, we can't, we closed the hearing.
We didn't vote to close it.
We didn't close it?
No.
Oh, we didn't close it. Ken, you said, you can come up. I thought we did.
I'd just like to clarify, the decision is on the property and not the person. Isn't there a grandfather clause still in existence in the state of Massachusetts? Through the chair to the town council?
Yes, chapter 48, section 6.
And then secondly, to the building inspector. Is that not buildable, but is that a residence, according to the assessors, the town of Westport's somewhat liable if we're billing as a dwelling for at least the last 40 years. That's the only thing he can attest to, because that's when he moved into town. I'm up here saying it was a lot longer than that. Okay, now, from a town standpoint, are you saying that it's not a livable place right now?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I had no records.
Right, only record. And the record wouldn't be there because it was built, and the only thing that's been updates on it has been through electrical and plumbing over the years. Positive stuff. And again, if you drive by it, I'm sure you people have. I don't think anybody's faulting the location, how it's been handled, the people that live there. If you have any property in town that goes back 60 years, and you have renters in there, and you've never had one complaint about that piece of property and that dwelling, doesn't that mean anything to our community? All I'm suggesting is, and I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Chair, on this. I'm just saying, you were doing it based on the property, and I'm suggesting with the property and zoning, we have 154 pages. A couple of people called me on that and say, why do you have 154 pages of zoning? And I said, well, wait until next town meeting, we're gonna have more than that, because we need to have it to help people on board to deal with some of these issues. I'm not opposed to what you're trying to do, but I do think we have to look at it from the individual standpoint, from the community standpoint. That's why we have zoning to start with. This particular case, if there was anything that people said for public safety, for neighborhoods, for health-wise, anything at all, I think the present owner of this property would correct it and say, I'm not going to use that property anymore. All I'm suggesting is, isn't there another way that we can let this continue when it stays in the family hand? When it goes out of the family hands, then I think the grandfather clause, it's no longer in there.
No, it is.
It-
It goes with the property, it does not go with the family.
Well, in my case, in 1999, I was told by the town of Westport that it went with the family. And I had to do some upgrades, and Title V was one of them, and I
Well, Title
did
V
it.
is not grandfather.
No, that's what I'm saying. I did some stuff with the property, but in terms of staying in the family-owned, I mean, I can give you 20 names of people in town here, you can too.
Can we stay on this particular
This is
property?
grandfathered. I'm
But-
debating
but-
with the
but-
town.
But a decision, doesn't this decision that was agreed to and certified, doesn't that override grandfathering?
Well, I don't know what the decision was at the time, and I don't know what the issue was. Grandfathering would be a pre-existing non-conforming use. If it was used for having two residential dwellings on one lot. On December 31st, it has it, you change the and your bylaw says you can do it, you change your bylaw the next day, that's grandfathered all the way through. You would have to show that it has been consistently used for that purpose, but that's grandfathered. Then what would be needed would be a so-called finding, whether, they would just make the claim that it was grandfathered.
In this case, though, we took one big property and we made it into two properties. That now means that the zoning bylaws at the time of
Well, you
of
have
this.
that doll bat,
Yeah, but that-
I forgot
Yeah,
when
that
you
was,
asked me
that was,
earlier.
yes.
And that's if it,
All I'm saying is that zoning now is in effect when we split the two into, when we split one into two, and we mandated that in our decision, that when we did that, and again, we worked very closely with the family to try and make this as amenable as possible, that one of the major conditions is that one of those structures cannot be a residence.
I don't understand how you, typically the lot would be split by the planning board in a subdivision.
Right.
So I don't know how you split it, but in any event, if that was the case, and you're right, Dalbutt said that a lot in existence at the time, even if it was held in common, is still protected. So you're right, this one would, once you've created new lots, then yes, they have to come into conformity, or they should be in conformity.
But legally, okay, this zoning board does not have that authority. Planning board could, but the zoning board doesn't. And I'm just, if this goes to court, we've got some issues here from the town's perspective as well. And all I'm suggesting is, isn't there a way that we can solve this on a short term for the family? Because if it goes to court, what you suggested, and it's in the minutes, suggests that maybe you overstepped your bounds as a zoning board on the same family issue, not respecting any kind of grandfather situation in there. When you have the chairman of the board, of the assessors is doing it as a dwelling and taxing him as a dwelling, you have statements from the public, you can bring in people that rented it from that standpoint. I think we're gonna have a pretty strong case against the town on this, and I'm suggesting we don't need to do that. Thank you.
I'll make a statement that we've had numerous cases over the years in which assessors' records are not reflective at all of what we found to be the case. The assessors have a reason for what they do, and zoning has reasons for what they do, and it's not always in concert with each other. So I understand what you're saying, and I do put weight to what the assessors say, but they are two separate things.
Just think of zoning at 4 Main Street, 4 Main Street.
Yeah,
Yeah, Main Road.
Yeah, what about
Just think of the zoning there in the last 20 years or 30 years, and the rulings that took place in that. There's past history within the town. in
Yeah,
terms of how we
that
handle
was
grandfather.
non-conforming, a non-conforming use, and I had to come to the zoning board on a regular basis, 2 or 3 times, to do what I did, and the zoning board.
I'm not talking about you personally, I'm just talking about the history of the town.
Yeah.
That's one example.
Yeah.
How would you use
Holly
tax
Avenue is
now?
another example.
It's not really relevant.
It's not really relevant.
Of what it was taxed 50
No,
years
no,
ago
we're
when it was
talking
one lot.
about- we're talking
Well, what
about
is that lot being taxed as now?
Two separate properties, Chris?
That one is a multi-house, and I don't know the code. It's still a multi-house, it's the code on the field card. Multi-house.
Can I add a couple, quick little things? if I may?
Yes.
You know, I understand there's a hearing in 2018, and two things. I presume that no matter, notwithstanding whatever occurred at the hearing, nothing would prohibit the granting of a variance for what's being sought because of what was granted at that hearing. And then secondly, okay, and then a couple more points. A question was asked about building permits. I remember in one of these prior hearings, someone had submitted, I believe they submitted aerial photos, I believe they're from 1935, if I'm correct. So we know that the structure existed at least in 1935, and I would be willing to bet that back in pre-1935, and I don't know if building permits were a procedure that was utilized or not. I would doubt it, but that's another thing. Again, we were asked to come and show that someone lived there at the institution of zoning, so we kind of stopped in 1973.
You keep saying that you were asked to come. We didn't ask you to come.
That was discussed and suggested. I'll say suggested, or it was a notion that flowed from here to this side, and that's why we're bringing it back.
Your aerial order, it was brought up. That's why I wanted to look at the records, because in my recollection, it was clearly brought up that these were sheds. So they would show up, but they weren't residences.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about for the purpose of the building permit. We've had people testify already, at least since 1973, someone's lived there continuously. I don't think there's any doubt in that regard. I'm just talking about the building permit component. And the other part is, the issue of what was sought in the prior hearing about trying to get a special permit, about the issue of having someone reside and want to have, basically using it as an accessory dwelling unit, having one owner residing and whatnot. If Mr. Emerald were to overnight move into one, then the problem would be solved. But the reality is there's no real difference. You'd still have the same structures there, you'd still have a kitchen in the small house. The world would still be the same.
But in one case, it would be meeting zoning, and in one case, you're not.
Yeah.
And it was also, take a look at the bylaw itself for the detached units, and you will see the purpose of it.
Right.
And it's not to have a landlord.
Right, no, I understand. And in addition to that, Mr. Emerald lives right off of this property, so there's still, there's an interest in keeping it safe for her, and they wouldn't be having this tenant there and someone lived in this house if it wasn't a safe, desirable environment. And there's nothing been there that's been disruptive. We heard a hearing earlier tonight of Airbnb causing chaos in the neighborhood. There's no chaos here. Everything here is the status quo for decades. They're great citizens, good people, and we're just asking that you consider the variance and grant it.
Okay, could I ask one question?
Sure.
We're looking for a variance here. What would be a hardship?
Sure.
Not financial, but
Right, no, I understand.
what would be a hardship that you would use for this? Because that's what we have to do in our decision.
Yeah. I made mention there both as to the shape and the topography. The shape is like a six-sided, it's not a rectangle, it's like six-sided, one of which is a giant arc. And then the other more important part is the topography. We always hear about the case soil topography. In reality, we know that I've rarely seen that met. Here you actually have a house that's on a steep, rocky slope. It's actually built on top of like a real drop-off hill. So it's a true topography situation. And it's further for hardship. I know you don't want financial, but there would
Well, no.
be a financial hardship.
From what you're telling me, it almost sounds just the opposite. You're saying it's built on a steep, rocky kind of thing and so forth.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you can't build it there because it's steep and rocky.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying, but I'm describing the topography as it exists,
Yeah.
and the shape of the lot as it exists. Because again, we're not seeking new construction. There's nothing new, just status quo is all we're seeking.
But it is the hardship includes financial in the bylaw.
Yes, but financial as it pertains to the aspects of the land, not financially like you're going to lose money.
Well, the land does generate income by renting it out.
Yes.
And you would go in the red and almost immediately if you had to stop renting it out.
Okay, any other comments? Any other discussion?
I just want to ask Jerry, if you were asking for them to ask for a continuance, what do you hope to find in the next?
No, I
Month.
want, I would like to see what really was brought up in those hearings. We're only hearing one side of this right now. Because I don't remember what we actually did in terms of this compromise. How strong was that? Did he actually agree to do those things? I don't recall that.
He wasn't
You're
at
talking
the
about, so you're talking about the last year?
2018, you weren't at the meeting. And I don't believe,
I have the
I believe
decision,
Mrs. Amaral had a representative, she was not at the meeting
But I
either.
heard Roger say he, the applicant agreed to make that unhabitable. Now,
And just so I'm for clear, we're talking about the most recent hearing? The
No,
recent-
2018.
Okay, okay.
2018 is what set this in motion.
No, I understand.
If we didn't have
I-
2018, we
No, I
would.
just wanted clarification of which hearing.
Well, I was at the 2018 hearing, and I remember it being a very complex
Yes.
issue, and that we went around and around about it. And I agree with you, Jerry. I sort of feel like I need to go back and look at it and study it some more before I can make a decision, because we did make a decision, and I know we really deliberated on it, and we tried to work with the petitioner and came up with this, and it seemed like this was a good solution. So and I do know we've tried repeatedly to get back in touch with the owner to find out if what we'd agreed on had been indeed done, and we were never able, they never responded.
It wasn't done.
Right. So, I don't, I wouldn't mind having some time to review it.
And I'm not saying that I wouldn't agree to a variance, I'm not saying that at all. I want to see what the facts were.
Right.
From what we talked about, and is it reasonable now to consider changing that? Maybe things have changed. I mean, I know we didn't have a house full of people here saying I lived there for 50 years. I never saw that at those hearings.
Well, you want to make a motion?
Could I
Doty,
Oh.
I believe you still have it open.
Yeah.
Yes, it is still.
So,
Name and
Dorothy
ad-
Paul, I
name-
live at 2048 Main Road. I have a question for town council, if I may. Just technical. In a case where there was a variance issued some number of years ago, and there were some conditions laid down, does this board have the power to change that in a new variance hearing? That's my question.
Well, if there was an application by the property owner, I think they could.
But would this application be suitable for that, or would they have to come back another time to do that?
Well, the problem is, I'm kind of flying blind
Right.
here. I haven't seen any of this. I was here for another matter and asked to stay over, so, frankly, I would also benefit from having a continuance so that I could see what was going on. But your question is, can a board issue another variance later on?
Changing the earlier
That
terms.
would, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
If the property owner comes in and says, I got a variance to do X, and now I want a variance to do X plus
Right.
Y, yeah, they can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. So you want to make a motion? I don't.
Where are we?
Is it a motion to close the hearing?
Not unless,
No?
if Jerry wants to make a motion
Or
to
make a motion
continue,
for-
or we're going to close the hearing.
To close it here.
Is,
Well, wait a
Or
minute.
continue.
But we're gonna
No.
continue.
I'm saying,
No, I don't want-
I'm asking for a motion, and you talked about doing a continuance.
Yes, and what I'm saying is, I can't be here on the 20th. So if you want to continue the 20th, go right ahead.
that's, Cynthia's up
I'm
again.
here.
But that's what I'm saying.
I'll block my calendar up.
Just so you know, you do have a clock ticking. I don't know where you are on that, but unless they agree to the
What
continuance.
we would request the petitioner to do is to agree to a continuance, in which case it would also delay the decision date.
Yeah.
We assent to a continuance if it's
We have a
sought. If
form
it's-
for that.
It's gotta be.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to do that, then let me make it.
Can I make a motion to continue this hearing till September 20th?
With the approval of the petitioner.
With the approval of the petitioner and extending the time that we have to make the decision based on the fact that we're continuing it.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Jerry?
Well, yeah, because I won't be here, so I.
But
I know, but you have to vote on this part.
Vote on it, but you've
Yeah,
already
okay,
voted.
it's unanimous. We will continue this to September 20th?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
That will give us any benefit of the doubt. We will be able to make a better decision.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Blake, thank you for being here. And for all three cases, it was helpful. And you have the distinct honor of being the only time that we actually rejected two in the same hearing, and
Can you
well,
get a copy of all the stuff from 2018 for me?
I will email that to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And probably.
okay, next order of business is 131 Petty Lane and approval of a revised plan. As you know, the last meeting we had, we approved a petition from 131 Petty Lane under the condition that,
Have a great night, everyone.
Bye, thank you very much for your help.
with the plans submitted. And they came back and submitted new plans, which actually are, I believe, less,
Yes.
Well, they were never non-conforming.
they were never non-conforming, but now they're even less non-conforming.
Mr. Chairman, I just need to excuse myself.
So you have to
because-
recuse yourself.
Because
Yeah.
Right.
I will be recusing myself because I am a butter to
Right,
this.
so voting on this will be, okay.
The ones you voted before, including me.
Yes. You have. Okay, it will be Barbara Pontilova, myself, Raj Menard, Constance Guy, Ray Elias, and Sophia Kozakowicz. We'll vote on this, and it will be a majority vote. All we want to know is, do we agree that the approved plans are not substantially different from the original and does not change what we would have, our decision from the previous? If we say, they're not, they would not have changed our decision from the previous, then we can, then we don't need to have another hearing. If you believe that these are substantial changes and we need to investigate it further, then we would require that that a new petition be provided to go over this. So, anybody have any comments?
I think it's straightforward.
I think it's straightforward as well.
It actually leaves more
Yes.
unused land.
It leaves more space on the sides. So you make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the revised plans submitted, whatever they were, help me out here.
The last meet, was it the last meeting?
Well, no.
The revised plan submitted by Carmen Legato on Tuesday, July 25th, 2023, is not being more substantially different than the plan proposed previously.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. That's passes. Okay, a couple of minor things left. Approval of the meeting minutes of July 19, 2023. July 19, 2023, right. Again, Maria has provided that and whatever comments. So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 19, 2023.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, Westport Sea Farms, 2065 Main Road zoning issues.
Did I leave or no?
Oh, yeah, he can come back.
Yeah, I think he went to get water.
Yeah. So, Ralph, can you kind of
They've got tables, and the tables are gonna have to go.
Excuse me?
They've got tables, the tables are gonna have to go. And I've also got to look into it.
Okay, so can you just give us, it's a quick, so,
It's a quick thing, they got license to do, he's a oyster farmer out of the local waters, farms and oysters, they produce them there. Back when, I forget when the hearing was here, when the previous owner, Mr. Lee's, stated the history of the building, was pretty much granted that they could do that. But now they've set up, I've heard, anywhere from 8 to 10 tables on the dock, and it's tying up the end of the main road, so she can't do that.
so they essentially running a restaurant.
There's essentially restaurant, and that's not how it was issued. It was issued, you buy it and go.
Okay. So what's transpiring then?
What's transpiring is they've got tables that have got to go.
No, but I mean, so you're gonna,
What's happened is I'm looking at the meeting minutes that were in this board and in the select board meeting.
And then what?
Meeting minutes from this meeting, from the Board of Appeals meeting, and the selectman's office.
What about the Board of Health? I mean, because now they have a porta potty.
I don't deal with the Board of Health.
Yeah.
I
But they're right next door.
I got enough of my own stuff to do.
How do they have, and what about the
Water.
liquor,
That's what we license the Board of Selectmen.
that's a board of selectmen, they can do whatever they want.
They can
they
give
can
them
do
in-
that? They can do that in a residential neighborhood?
They've done it.
They've done it,
They've done it.
yes.
I mean, even the inn, the inn's got a liquor.
That's own business down there, right?
It's a business, so.
But we don't have anything in front of us. All we wanted to know really was the status of what's
That's where
going
it's
on
gonna-
and
that's
what's gonna
where
happen.
It's gonna end up coming here if she doesn't.
It's gonna end up coming here, so
I
that
believe it's gonna end up coming.
as a,
Well, it's gonna be administrative appeal, because they cease and desist.
oh, you're gonna write a cease and desist
Once they
to
get the facts
stop
together,
the,
cease and desist on the table.
okay,
They're not gonna like it, they're gonna bring their heels in.
okay.
You're gonna be here.
So that's something that you're gonna be doing in the near future, writing a cease and desist.
During the next week.
Okay,
Okay, excuse me, because this is of interest to me.
yep.
The cease and desist reason is what?
Because of the tables. They've got 10 or 12 all sort of.
Okay.
Dining tables, which,
Well, let me
Yeah, more
ask
than
something.
that.
yeah, I've said, I've heard
They can
different.
see
Is the
75 people.
reason they were allowed to do this in the first place at all, as a commercial venture, was it because they were a farm
They were farm.
or because it was
agriculture.
non-conforming?
No, it's agriculture, I believe.
Okay,
So that's why I gotta go back into the.
so which is supposed to be 5 acres and.
Right, it's out in the water, he's got an area out in the water that is
Right.
scallops, he does his thing, brings it back in, processes it there.
And that is the reason.
It was just gonna be, process it there, sell it there, and then
It was it to go, and they had mentioned something about maybe having a tasting room or something like that, or?
Yeah.
there was a room, but it's not, I mean, you
Right.
buy your stuff inside.
Yeah, it's,
Because it's like an L-shaped area, and it's processed in the back, and you come in and you buy it.
I love that place. I might have to
It's not
recuse
proper
myself
water.
on this one.
right,
There's not proper water, there's not proper septic,
right.
and
Well-
it's being allowed to just happen.
Let
Well,
me say
others
this,
here.
we have a bylaw in this town. There are 2 bylaws that affect that property, but if it's only being permitted as a farm, I think that those 2 don't exist. One says that you can have a non-conformity, if it was used that way before, that was a fish market, you can keep using it.
It's a fish market, but not as a restaurant.
Yeah, but they can come in and say, well, or even the zoning enforcement officer can make the determination that, for example, a seafood restaurant isn't quite so.
You speak so. Unlike the rest of us.
Okay. Anyway, if it were, let's say, for example, they sold retail seafood, and the zoning enforcement officer determined in his mind that a restaurant, if they cook that same seafood, that's not significantly more detrimental, and he could just allow it. Or they could come to this board and make that determination. that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. So that's one bylaw that says if you've got something that's non-conforming, you can keep doing it. However, we also have a bylaw that says that once you lose that non-conforming aspect, you can never
You can't go
recover it.
back. Once you're
That's in the
conforming,
bylaw,
right.
okay?
Yes.
So when Albert made that into a residence and clearly had to make it into a residence for Board of Health and in the town, I was
Yeah,
told.
I'm the guy that destroyed the inside. I did all the work inside for him.
Okay, so it was clearly made into a residence. That lost its non-conforming use. That's the only point I want to make. Is that
But didn't Al also use it as his place, because Al also had an oyster farm.
right?
Correct.
So wasn't
Okay,
that the bottoms, the use of the bottom floor?
and they can still do that
Okay.
if he's a resident there. If he's a resident there.
Oh.
A resident, our bylaw allows it. A resident, fisherman,
Farmer.
tradesperson, whatever. So, yes, if they live there, they could continue doing their oyster farm. That doesn't make it into a restaurant or whatever. So I just want to point out there's two.
They don't live there, they actually
No.
rent it out as an Airbnb. Just so you know.
And a farm, and a farm stand, or that you could get that, where you could, you know, live there and sell your farming produce.
And it's, but they're selling things that aren't raised on the farm.
That are not.
Right. They
Right.
have lobster rolls, chowder,
Right.
hot dogs,
Right.
salads.
Yeah, it's a
And
restaurant.
so what about, so how, I just want to know, how do you get the determination to be approved for a liquor license? And,
That's,
Without-
but that's
That's
a select board.
That's a select
That's a
board.
select board, and
but
then we
isn't
don't
that
answer.
also, but isn't that also a state matter?
State, once a
Yes.
selectman sign off on it, the state gives them the license.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the state's not, are you looking at it from a zoning point of view?
But-
Because the state's not going to be looking at it from a zoning point of
But
view.
why, well, I think what Constance is asking is why did the select board approve a liquor license and the Board of Health approve the operation of a restaurant
Right.
when it was clearly outside of zoning, instead of coming to us before they went and
Well,
said,
that's-
okay.
That's something they should have done.
Been saying that for
Yes.
years.
Well, yes.
Yeah,
And-
Because they don't. They
They
don't
don't.
consider it at all. Even when it's
That's-
presented to them, they don't
Yeah,
consider it.
that's what
What do
gets
they- what do
us,
they have for a public water supply?
they don't have any public water supply.
They don't.
But you know what's so ironic about all of this? Is that that's one of the nice places that people
Yeah.
want to go to. It's very popular. Hear it all the time. We have a couple of other places that I will not name that are similar, that.
Have similar issues
You would,
up the road.
the people would have a riot if you tried to close them down.
Right.
Some of the nicest places in town, but yet they don't comply either.
Yes, and then there's people who are trying to comply and they get shut down.
So that says something about our zoning. Maybe we ought to look at the zoning and do something a little bit different, or put some special districts. We have talked in the past about making like special village districts with, say, the Point, the intersection of Hicks Bridge and Horse Neck and Pine Hill, where you could have like sort of limited types of things that would fit into a little villagey thing. The planning board has discussed that, but it just, I mean, there's so many things that's way down on the list.
But adequate parking is a zoning
Well,
issue.
that is it, and that's important.
Right.
But,
And where
but
is
still, the bottom line is, you're gonna write a cease and desist letter, and we go from there.
Other tables and go from there.
Right.
Yes, but I was trying to.
Because that's not how it was
make-
supposed to be. It was supposed to be buy it, take it, go. So I'm trying to
Right.
look for the minutes that were in this
Buy it.
room, where Mr. Lees was in this room, and he gave the history what he
And
done.
so you can buy a beer and take it and go. Are we
I'm
living
not
in
doing
Louisiana?
He doesn't do liquor.
No, they
No.
I
don't.
had a lobster roll and a beer and chips, and I ate it. That was fun.
I love that
Yeah,
place.
because they're not allowed to take out.
No,
No.
you have to
Can't
have the liquor in the enclosed fenced area.
And they
Okay.
can.
But you're allowed to sit there, you're allowed to have a drink outside, but you can't eat outside, is that?
No, you can eat
Oh, I
outside.
know you can,
Yeah.
But you can't take shucked oysters out either to go. So if you can
Right.
go and buy a dozen oysters,
Right.
you gotta shuck them yourself. They can't
Right.
sell a plate of shucked because that's, right? And they can't sell up, they always open up the alcohol, they don't, so you can't,
Right.
I mean, if you walk out of the area, then
You-
you're breaking the law.
You
but-
can't sit on your boat with a glass of wine, you can't do any of that. You have to stay right in that area.
Okay, all
And you
right.
can't bring anything in, they're very
You can't bring a
strict.
dog either.
So,
No
so
dog.
we have what's gonna go on, you're gonna write a cease and desist, and then something's gonna happen after that.
I better go
Right.
to sleep.
And that may be either go back to the select board
How
or the
did you
zoning
get this
board
on
of
a
vote.
complaint?
What's that?
You got this on a complaint?
But I'm
Okay.
trying to avoid something similar to what we just with the bed and breakfast.
Mine?
I wanted
Yeah.
to kind of
It's probably gonna go in the
see
same.
that whatever the reason is,
Oh.
it's not because of a farm.
Oh, yeah,
That's what I was trying to.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other,
Yeah, and this was sent to me by one of the concerned citizens, and there are other people that have been asking questions as well. And so I just sent it on to be part of your packet, which raises some very good questions, because as much as people love it, it does seem as if there are different rules
yeah,
for
I mean,
them.
you know, how can you violate like every rule in the town and still have a business?
Right.
Well,
And
you
yet there's
can't,
other
but-
businesses in town are trying to do the right
Yeah.
thing. Got permission by the
Right.
Board of Health to do something, and then it forgot the
Right.
name.
Right.
But obviously, you can in this town, and so, and it's not just one department that's turning a blind eye and not looking at it, seems
It's
to
all-
be,
it's all the people who
We're the
wanna,
only ones
It
who
seems-
enforce
it's all the
law
people who
here.
want a
it
lobster roll.
seems to be endemic.
Okay, any other business?
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Do I have a
All
second?
in favor? Thank you, Ralph.
See you, Ralph.
This was a tough one
All
for
in
you
favor, say
tonight.
aye. Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
aye,
I'm sorry, who seconded?
I did. Thank you, Val.